I'd give every dollar I have just to feel something again. Those were the words a dying billionaire whispered to a homeless child on Christmas Eve, right before she saved his life without spending a penny. What happened next shattered everything he thought he knew about success, family, and what it really means to be rich. This is a story about a man who had everything money could buy, but was starving for something no fortune could purchase. Stay until the end to see how one invitation changed two broken families forever. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The champagne had gone flat an hour ago. Ethan Calloway stared at the crystal flute sitting untouched on the mahogany conference table, watching tiny bubbles cling desperately to the sides before surrendering to stillness. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, Manhattan glittered like a jewelry box someone had carelessly overturned across the darkness. 43 floors below, the city pulsed with the frantic energy of Christmas Eve, last-minute shoppers clutching bags, couples huddled against the December cold, families streaming toward Grand Central with suitcases and ski equipment. Ethan felt nothing watching them. "Mr. Calloway," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, startling him from his trance. "Your car is waiting downstairs, and your ex-wife called again about tomorrow morning's pickup time." He pressed the button without looking at it. "Tell her 8 o'clock is fine." "She said 8:30, actually. Something about, 'Whatever she wants is fine, Jennifer.'" His voice came out harsher than intended. "Just whatever she wants." The intercom went silent. Ethan immediately regretted his tone. Jennifer had stayed late on Christmas Eve just to make sure he didn't spend the entire night in the office, something he'd done last year and the year before that. She had 3 kids at home probably waiting to open presents, and here he was snapping at her like some cliché corporate asshole. He was 32 years old. He'd built Callaway Technologies from a college dorm room into a $3 billion empire before his 30th birthday. Forbes had put him on their cover. Ted wanted him to speak. His phone contained the private numbers of senators, celebrities, and CEOs who claimed to be his friends but really just wanted access to his bank account, or his influence, or his brand. And he was so goddamn tired he could barely remember why any of it had mattered in the first place. His phone buzzed. Another text from Amanda, his ex-wife. "Just confirming you're okay with 8:30. Jake's excited to see you on the 26th. Try not to cancel this time?" The words hit like a punch to the sternum. This time. As if he made a habit of disappointing their 6-year-old son. Except he did, didn't he? 3 times in the last 4 months he'd pushed back their weekend plans because of board meetings or investor calls or that emergency trip to Tokyo that definitely couldn't wait, except it absolutely could have. Jake was spending Christmas Eve and Christmas Day with Amanda and her new husband Derek in their Connecticut colonial with the big backyard and the golden retriever and the white picket fence that might as well have been imported from a Norman Rockwell painting. Meanwhile, Ethan would spend tonight in his sterile Tribeca penthouse, surrounded by minimalist furniture that cost more than most people's cars and felt about as warm as a hospital waiting room. He typed back, "I'll be there at 8:30. Tell Jake I love him." Amanda didn't respond. She rarely did anymore unless logistics demanded it. Their marriage had collapsed 18 months ago under the weight of his 70-hour work weeks, and her very reasonable expectation that he occasionally act like a husband and father. The divorce had been civilized, expensive, and entirely his fault. She'd gotten primary custody because even his own lawyers agreed he was never actually home enough to take care of a kid. Ethan grabbed his coat and headed for the elevator, nodding at the skeleton crew of security guards still on duty. They wished him Merry Christmas with genuine warmth that he couldn't quite return. The elevator descended in silence, that particular silence that only exists in expensive buildings where everything is designed to muffle and smooth and eliminate any trace of actual human messiness. His driver was waiting at the curb, engine running, looking even more miserable than Ethan felt. "Evening, Mr. Calloway. Heading home?" Ethan paused with his hand on the car door. Home. What a word. His penthouse had cost $14 million, but calling it home felt like calling a museum exhibit cozy. "Actually, Marcus, take the rest of the night off. Be with your family." Marcus looked startled. "Sir, I'm happy to—" "I'm serious. Go home. I'll get a cab if I need one. It's Christmas Eve. You won't find a cab for miles, not in this weather." As if on cue, fat snowflakes began drifting down from the charcoal sky. The kind of picture-perfect snow that existed specifically to make lonely people feel lonelier. Then I'll walk. Really. Go be with your wife. Marcus studied him for a moment with something that might have been concern or pity. You sure you're all right, Mr. Calloway? I'm fine. Merry Christmas, Marcus. He closed the door before his driver could protest further and watched the black town car pull away from the curb, taillights disappearing into the thickening snow. The cold hit him immediately. He'd forgotten gloves, forgotten a scarf, forgotten that December in New York doesn't care how much money you have. Ethan started walking with no particular destination in mind. Around him, the city transformed into something from a snow globe, all soft edges and muffled sounds. Couples passed him holding mittened hands. A group of college kids stumbled out of a bar singing off-key Christmas carols. A homeless man huddled in a doorway with a cardboard sign that read "Hungry. Anything helps. God bless." Ethan pulled out his wallet and dropped $200 bills into the man's cup without breaking stride. The man called out thanks, but Ethan barely heard it. He did this sometimes, gave away absurd amounts of money to strangers, not because he was particularly generous, but because he hoped it might make him feel something. It never did. The money meant so little to him that giving it away felt like throwing stones into an ocean. He'd been walking for maybe 20 minutes when he found himself in front of a small cafe he'd never noticed before despite passing this neighborhood 100 times. Warm light spilled through its foggy windows. Inside, he could see families crowded around small tables, could hear the faint sound of laughter and conversation. A hand-painted sign on the door read, "The Hedgehog Cafe, open until midnight on Christmas Eve, everyone welcome." Everyone welcome. Ethan pushed through the door and was immediately hit by a wall of warmth, coffee smell, and noise. The place was packed. Every table occupied, people standing in corners holding mugs, a line at the counter. Christmas music played from an old radio behind the register. Paper snowflakes hung from the ceiling, clearly made by children based on their enthusiastic lack of symmetry. He ordered a black coffee from a teenager with a Santa hat and too much eyeliner, paid with a 20 and told her to keep the change, then carried his cup to the only empty spot he could find, a tiny table near the window that probably qualified as a fire hazard given how thoroughly it blocked the emergency exit. From his seat, Ethan watched the cafe like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. At the table nearest him, a young couple fed French fries to a baby who kept smashing them into her face with pure joy. Across the room, an elderly man read a picture book to two kids who hung on every word despite clearly having heard the story 100 times. Near the counter, a woman in scrubs, just off a shift probably, talked on her phone in Spanish while absently stirring sugar into her coffee. These people weren't rich. You could tell from the worn coats hung on chair backs, the way they savored their coffee like it was a luxury, the fact that they were spending Christmas Eve in a tiny cafe instead of some expensive restaurant. But they had something Ethan had lost somewhere along his climb to the top. They looked happy. No, not happy. That wasn't quite right. They looked present, like they were actually living their lives instead of sleepwalking through an endless series of obligations and disappointments. Ethan pulled out his phone and opened his photos. The most recent ones were all screenshots, stock prices, email threads, architectural renderings of his new office building in San Francisco. He had to scroll back 11 days to find a picture of Jake, taken during their last weekend together. His son grinned at the camera holding a poorly constructed Lego spaceship, his two front teeth missing, his hair sticking up in that way it always did no matter how much Amanda tried to comb it down. That weekend felt like it had happened to someone else. Ethan could barely remember the conversation they'd had, what they'd eaten for dinner, whether Jake had laughed or cried or needed help with homework. The whole visit existed in his memory as a vague blur of guilt and distraction, punctuated by the 15 times he'd checked his email when he thought Jake wasn't looking. What the hell was wrong with him? His coffee had gone cold. The cafe was starting to empty out as families headed home to put kids to bed before Santa came. Ethan stayed planted in his chair, unable to summon the energy to return to his empty penthouse, unable to shake the feeling that something inside him had broken so thoroughly he'd never be able to identify all the pieces. The door opened and a woman rushed in, bringing with her a gust of cold air and snowflakes. She had a kid bundled up against her hip, a little girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old, with a pink knit hat pulled low over her ears. Sorry, the woman called to the teenager at the register. I know you're closing soon. Can we just take your time, Ms. Bennett? No rush. The woman, Ms. Bennett, apparently, set the little girl down and began unwinding about 47 layers of winter clothing while the kids stood patiently like this was a routine they'd performed 1,000 times. When the jacket and scarf and hat finally came off, Ethan could see the girl properly. She had dark curly hair, brown skin a few shades deeper than her mother's, and the kind of enormous eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. The mother was younger than Ethan had initially thought, maybe 30, 31. She wore a coat that had seen better years and the kind of exhaustion that comes from working too many jobs for not enough money. But when she smiled down at her daughter, her whole face transformed into something radiant. "Hot chocolate?" she asked the girl. "With extra marshmallows?" "Don't push your luck, kiddo." They got in line at the counter, the little girl swinging her mother's hand and chattering about something Ethan couldn't quite hear. He found himself watching them with an intensity that would have been creepy if anyone noticed, but everyone in the cafe was either leaving or absorbed in their own conversations. There was something magnetic about the easy affection between the mother and daughter, the way they existed in their own private world of inside jokes and comfortable silence. His phone buzzed, a text from Jennifer. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Calloway. Don't work too hard tomorrow." Tomorrow. Christmas Day. Stretching ahead of him like a prison sentence, no work to distract him, no sun to pretend for, just 16 waking hours in his penthouse with nothing but his thoughts and his regrets and his bone-deep certainty that he'd made every wrong choice for the last 10 years. The little girl must have noticed him staring because suddenly she was looking directly at him with those enormous eyes, her expression curious rather than afraid. Her mother was still at the counter paying for their drinks. The girl tilted her head to one side like a bird examining a particularly interesting worm. Then she walked over to his table. "Hi," she said simply. Ethan blinked, unsure how to respond. When was the last time a child had voluntarily approached him? When was the last time anyone had approached him without wanting something? "Hi," he managed. "Why are you sad?" The question hit him like a slap. "I'm not—" He stopped. What was the point of lying to a kid? "How did you know I was sad?" She shrugged with the easy wisdom of someone who hadn't yet learned to hide their observations behind polite small talk. "Your face looks like my mom's face when she thinks I'm sleeping, but she's actually crying in the kitchen." Jesus Christ. Ethan felt something crack inside his chest. "I'm sorry your mom cries." "It's okay. I give her hugs and then she feels better." The girl studied him critically. "Do you need a hug?" Before Ethan could formulate an answer, the mother appeared behind her daughter, looking mortified. "Lily, I'm so sorry, sir. She doesn't understand personal boundaries yet." "It's fine," Ethan heard himself say. We were just talking." The mother, Claire apparently, based on what the barista had called her, gently gripped her daughter's shoulder. "Come on, baby. Let's leave this nice man alone." "But, Mom, he's sad. He looks like you when Lily." Claire's voice carried a note of warning, but also a desperate kind of embarrassment that Ethan recognized from his own parenting failures. "I'm really sorry," she said again to Ethan. "She's going through a phase where she thinks everyone needs rescuing." Claire steered Lily toward a table on the opposite side of the cafe, glancing back once with an apologetic smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Ethan watched them settle into their seats, the little girl swinging her legs while her mother helped her with the hot chocolate, warning her it was too hot to drink yet. The barista was wiping down tables and stacking chairs. Closing time. Ethan should leave, go back to his penthouse, order some expensive dinner that would taste like cardboard, watch some movie he wouldn't actually follow, fall asleep on his couch and wake up at 3 a.m. with his neck cramped, and his mind racing through quarterly projections and the bitter knowledge that his son was celebrating Christmas in someone else's house because Ethan had failed at the one job that actually mattered. He stood up, pulled on his coat, and then he did something he couldn't quite explain even to himself. He walked over to Claire and Lily's table. Both of them looked up, the mother wary, the daughter delighted. "I'm sorry to bother you," Ethan said, his voice sounding strange in his own ears. "But your daughter asked me a question earlier and I think I owe her an answer." Claire frowned slightly, protective instinct kicking in. "Listen, if she said something inappropriate, she asked if I needed a hug." Ethan looked at Lily. And the answer is yes, I think I really do. Lily beamed like he'd just told her she'd won the lottery. See, Mom, I was right. Claire studied Ethan more carefully now, and whatever she saw in his face must have satisfied some test because her expression softened slightly. Are you okay? No, Ethan said honestly. I don't think I've been okay for a long time. The words hung in the air between them. The barista was turning off lights. Outside, the snow fell heavier now, turning the street into something from a movie about better lives than any of them were actually living. Where's your family? Lily asked with the blunt curiosity of a child who hadn't yet learned that some questions hurt. My son is with his mother. They have Christmas together. I see him the day after. That's sad, Lily pronounced. You should come to Christmas with us. Lily! Claire's face flushed. You can't just invite strangers to… Why not? You said Christmas is about helping people who are lonely, and he's lonely. I can tell. Claire looked at Ethan, and he saw the exact moment she registered his expensive coat, his Italian leather shoes, the watch on his wrist that cost more than she probably made in 6 months. Her expression shifted, not quite hostile, but definitely guarded. I appreciate the thought, she said carefully, but I'm sure this gentleman has plans. I don't, Ethan said. Then, surprising himself again, I mean, I have nowhere to be. If the offer was genuine, not that I expect it to be, that would be insane. I'm a complete stranger. But if it was, I'd really like that. He sounded desperate. He was desperate. Standing in this closing cafe on Christmas Eve, essentially begging a struggling single mother to let him crash her holiday because the alternative was going back to his multi-million-dollar penthouse and finally admitting that he'd traded everything meaningful in his life for money and success, and the kind of hollow victory that turned out not to be victory at all. Claire bit her lip, clearly torn between the impulse to help someone who was obviously hurting and the very reasonable instinct not to invite strange men into her home. I don't even know your name. Ethan Calloway. He extended his hand. She shook it tentatively. Claire Bennett. This is my daughter Lily. Hi. Lily waved with both hands like she was greeting a ship from shore. Hi, Lily. They stood there in awkward silence while the barista meaningfully started sweeping around their feet. Claire seemed to be waging some internal debate with herself. Ethan waited, holding his breath without quite knowing why this mattered so much. Finally, Claire sighed. Okay, I must be insane, but okay. We live about 6 blocks from here. It's not fancy at all. And dinner is going to be leftovers and whatever I can pull together because I worked a double shift today and didn't have time to… It sounds perfect, Ethan said, meaning it completely. Claire gave him a look that suggested she thought he might be mocking her. You say that now. They bundled Lily back into her layers and stepped out into the snow. The cold shocked Ethan's system all over again. But this time it felt cleansing somehow, like maybe it was burning away some of the numbness that had been building inside him for years. Claire didn't have a car. They walked, Lily holding both their hands and jumping over sidewalk cracks while humming something that might have been Jingle Bells if you were feeling charitable about it. They passed closed storefronts and lit windows, and the occasional car struggling through the snow. So what do you do, Ethan? Claire asked, her tone polite but careful. I run a tech company. Software development, cloud infrastructure, some AI stuff. Sounds complicated. It's mostly boring. Lots of meetings about money. She laughed, a short, surprised sound. Must pay well, though. That coat is Burberry, right? Ethan glanced down at his coat. He'd bought it without looking at the price tag, the way he bought everything now. Yeah. Is it that obvious? My ex-husband was into designer stuff. He's the reason I can spot expensive taste from a mile away. She said it lightly, but there was an edge underneath. Before he decided he'd rather spend money on his 23-year-old girlfriend than on his kid. I'm sorry. Claire shrugged. Ancient history. 3 years now. We're better off. They turned onto a side street lined with older buildings, the kind that used to be nice back when this neighborhood was thriving. Now they looked tired, peeling paint, crooked shutters, windows covered with security bars. Claire led them to a building halfway down the block and unlocked a door that stuck in the frame until she kicked it. Welcome to Casa Bennett, she said dryly. Try not to judge too harshly. She shouts it. They climbed 3 flights of stairs that smelled like cooking grease and pine sol. Lily raced ahead, her footsteps echoing in the stairwell. Claire followed more slowly, and Ethan noticed she favored her right leg slightly. "Injury?" he asked. "Just tired feet. I'm on them all day." "What do you do?" "Right now? Waitress at a diner, mornings. Retail at a phone store, afternoons. And I clean offices 3 nights a week." She said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "It pays the bills, mostly." 3 jobs. Jesus. Ethan felt a wave of shame thinking about his own complaints. His 70-hour weeks that he acted like were some kind of martyrdom, when really he just used work as an excuse to avoid dealing with actual human feelings. They reached the 3rd floor and Claire unlocked another stubborn door. Lily burst through it, shouting, "Grandma, we're home, and we brought someone." The apartment was small, maybe 600 square feet total, Ethan guessed. Kitchen visible from the door, a couch that had seen better decades, a TV playing what looked like a black and white Christmas movie. But unlike his sterile penthouse, this place felt lived in. Kids' drawings covered the refrigerator. A small artificial Christmas tree blinked in the corner, decorated with handmade ornaments. The whole space smelled like cinnamon and something baking. An elderly woman appeared from what must have been the bedroom, moving slowly with a walker. She looked at Ethan with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Mom, this is Ethan. He's joining us for dinner. Ethan, this is my mother, Ruth." Ruth studied him for a long moment. "You're that billionaire boy from the business magazines." The words hit the room like a grenade. Claire's head snapped toward him, her expression shifting from wary to almost hostile. "You're a billionaire?" she asked slowly. Ethan felt heat creep up his neck. "It's complicated." "It's really not," Ruth said, settling herself onto the couch with some difficulty. "You're Ethan Calloway. You made all that money with computers and phones or whatever. They wrote about your divorce in the New York Times. Your wife said you worked too much." "Grandma reads the business section," Lily informed him cheerfully, oblivious to the sudden tension. "She likes to know what rich people are doing." Claire crossed her arms. "So you're worth what, a couple $1 billion? And you're spending Christmas Eve with us because your daughter was kind to a stranger who needed kindness," Ethan said quietly, "and because I have nowhere else to go." "Rich people always have somewhere to go. Not if they've pushed everyone away." He met her eyes. "Look, if you want me to leave, I'll leave. I know how this looks. Some tech asshole slumming it for the holidays, probably going to go home and tell his rich friends about the quaint poor people he met. But I'm not. He stopped, frustrated. "I'm just tired of being alone." The silence stretched out. Lily looked between the adults with growing concern, sensing the mood shift without understanding it. Finally, Ruth spoke. "Set another place at the table, Claire. The man says he's lonely on Christmas Eve. We feed him. That's how we were raised." Claire looked at her mother for a long moment, then back at Ethan. "You try anything weird. I've got pepper spray and a baseball bat, and Grandma can hit pretty hard with that walker." "Damn right I can," Ruth confirmed. "Understood," Ethan said. The tension broke, at least partially. Claire moved to the tiny kitchen and started pulling things from the refrigerator while Lily grabbed Ethan's hand and dragged him to the couch to explain the plot of It's a Wonderful Life currently playing on TV, despite having obviously missed the first hour and having only the vaguest understanding of what was happening. Ethan sat down, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt something like peace settle over him. Dinner was chaotic and perfect in equal measure. Claire had apologized approximately 7 times for the meal. "It's just leftovers. I didn't know we'd have company. I would have made something better." But Ethan couldn't remember the last time food had tasted so good. Baked chicken that was slightly dry, mashed potatoes from a box, green beans from a can, and rolls that had definitely come from the discount bakery. None of it mattered. They ate at a table that barely fit 4 people, elbows bumping, Lily talking nonstop about her school play, and her best friend Maya, and the hamster in her classroom that she desperately wanted to adopt. "Absolutely not," Claire said, for what was clearly not the first time. "We can barely afford to feed ourselves, Lily. We're not getting a hamster." "But Mom, they eat like tiny amounts of food. I researched it." "You researched it," Claire repeated flatly, glancing at Ethan with an expression that said, "See what I deal with?" But she was smiling. Ruth didn't eat much, but she watched everyone with that same sharp intelligence, occasionally making dry comments that made Lily giggle and Claire roll her eyes. She asked Ethan pointed questions about his business, his divorce, his son. Most people were too intimidated by his money to be direct. Ruth didn't give a damn. "So you worked yourself into the ground and lost your family," Ruth summarized after hearing his story. "And now you're rich and miserable. That about sum it up?"
"Mom," Claire protested. "It's fine," Ethan said. "Yeah, that's pretty accurate." "Well, at least you're honest about it. Most men would spend the whole night making excuses."
After dinner, Lily insisted on showing Ethan her room, really just a corner of the living room separated by a curtain with a mattress on the floor and a small bookshelf made from milk crates. But she decorated it with the fierce pride of someone creating their first independent space. Drawings covered every inch of wall she could reach. A mobile made from paper stars hung from the ceiling. Her stuffed animals were arranged carefully by size. "This is Mr. Buttons," she said, holding up a threadbare teddy bear. "I've had him since I was born. And this is Princess Sparkle. She's new. Mom got her from the thrift store. And this is—" She went through every animal, every book, every drawing, explaining the story behind each one with the kind of detailed intensity that only small children can sustain. Ethan found himself genuinely engaged, asking questions, listening to her elaborate narratives about the secret lives of stuffed animals. When they emerged from behind the curtain, Claire was washing dishes while Ruth dozed in front of the TV. Claire glanced over her shoulder. "Sorry, she gets excited about new people." "Don't apologize. She's great." Claire turned off the water and dried her hands. "Can I ask you something? And I want an honest answer." "Okay." "Why are you really here?" Ethan leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. "You want the sad truth? I was sitting in that cafe thinking about going home to my empty apartment, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd had a real conversation with someone who wasn't trying to get something from me. Money or connections or access or whatever. Your daughter looked at me and saw a sad person who needed help. Not a billionaire or a business opportunity or a contact to exploit. Just a sad guy who needed kindness." He paused. "When was the last time someone saw you that way?" Claire was quiet for a long moment. 3 years ago, right after Lily's father left. I was working at a grocery store and I just broke down crying in the middle of my shift. This old woman, customer I'd never seen before, she sat with me for 20 minutes. Didn't try to fix anything, just sat there. She smiled slightly. "I've been trying to be that person for other people ever since." "Is that why Lily invited me?" "Probably. She's absorbed all my help people when you can speeches and decided to take them literally." Claire looked at her daughter, who was now rearranging her stuffed animals into some kind of elaborate scene. "She doesn't understand yet that sometimes it's not safe, that you can't just invite strangers into your home." "I could have been dangerous." "Yep." "Why'd you say yes?" Claire met his eyes. "Because I looked at you and saw someone who was drowning. And because Grandma's right, we help people who need help, even when it's inconvenient or stupid." They stood there in the tiny kitchen while the TV murmured and Lily sang to herself and Ruth snored softly. Outside, the snow continued falling, muffling the city into something that felt separate from the real world. A pocket universe where normal rules didn't apply. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly, "for taking a chance on me. Thank me tomorrow when you're not murdered in your sleep." He laughed, surprised by how good it felt. When was the last time he'd actually laughed? They watched Elf on the couch, Lily wedged between Ethan and Claire, Ruth in the recliner with a blanket, all of them exhausted but unwilling to break the spell of the evening. Lily fell asleep halfway through, her head dropping onto Ethan's shoulder with the complete trust that children have before the world teaches them to be afraid. Claire started to move her, but Ethan shook his head. "She's fine. She weighs like 40 pounds. Your arm's going to fall asleep." "I don't mind." And he didn't. He sat there with a 4-year-old drooling slightly on his Burberry coat and felt more content than he'd felt in years. Claire eventually dozed off too, her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle, one hand still absently resting on her daughter's leg. Ruth was the only one still awake when the movie ended. She looked at Ethan with those sharp eyes. "You planning to break my granddaughter's heart?" she asked quietly. "What?" "Lily, she gets attached fast. And Claire, She's been hurt enough. If you're just playing rich guy pretending to be normal for the holidays, you should leave now. Ethan looked at the woman sleeping beside him, her face soft and younger in rest, all the worry lines smoothed away. And at Lily, who had invited a stranger to Christmas because she saw someone who was sad and decided to help. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted, but I'm not playing. This is the most real I've felt in years. Ruth studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Fair enough, just don't make me regret letting you stay. I'll try not to. Ruth hauled herself up with the walker. I'm going to bed. Claire's got work tomorrow, Christmas Day shift at the diner, time and a half. She'll be gone by 6. You can let yourself out whenever. She shuffled toward the bedroom, then paused at the door. You know what your problem is, billionaire boy? What's that? You think money's supposed to make you happy, but money's just money. It doesn't love you back. It doesn't keep you warm at night. It doesn't ask if you're sad and give you hugs when you need them. She gestured at Claire and Lily. This is what matters, and you can't buy it. You can only earn it by being the kind of person who deserves it. She closed the bedroom door, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts and 2 sleeping people who had no reason to trust him, but had anyway. He sat there for another hour, afraid to move and wake them, afraid to break whatever magic had descended on this shabby little apartment. The Christmas tree lights blinked their steady rhythm. Outside, the snow had finally stopped, leaving the city wrapped in white silence. Ethan thought about his penthouse, his office, his empire, all the things he'd built and acquired and achieved. And he thought about this. A lumpy couch, a sleeping child, a woman who worked 3 jobs and still found room in her life for kindness. He knew which one felt more like home. Eventually, Claire stirred, blinking awake with that disoriented expression of someone who's fallen asleep in the wrong place. She saw Lily still draped across Ethan's lap and immediately moved to pick her up. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. It's okay, really. She lifted Lily carefully, the practiced motion of a single parent who's carried a sleeping child 1,000 times. Lily mumbled something incomprehensible and wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. Claire carried her behind the curtain, and Ethan heard the soft sounds of her putting Lily to bed, tucking her in, whispering something he couldn't quite make out. When Claire came back, she looked embarrassed. Some hostess I am, falling asleep on my guest. Best Christmas Eve I've had in years. She laughed softly. Your standards must be pretty low. You'd be surprised. They stood there awkwardly, both suddenly aware that everyone else was asleep, and they were alone, and this whole situation was bizarre, and neither of them knew quite how to navigate it. I should probably go, Ethan said, not moving. Probably, Claire agreed, also not moving. Thank you for tonight, for all of it. Lily's the one you should thank. She's the one who decided you needed rescuing. Smart kid. Too smart for her own good sometimes. Claire wrapped her arms around herself. Are you going to be okay, going back to your place alone on Christmas? The question caught him off guard. When was the last time someone had asked if he'd be okay? When was the last time anyone had cared? Honestly, I don't know. But I'm better than I was this morning. Claire nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I don't think you're as lost as you think you are. Lost people don't usually recognize they're drowning. They just keep swimming until they go under. Is that personal experience? 3 years of it. After Lily's father left, I was so angry and so scared and so completely underwater financially that I stopped sleeping, stopped eating, just kept working and telling myself if I just pushed a little harder, everything would be fine. She paused. It was my mom who finally snapped me out of it. She moved in with me. This was before she needed the walker, and she just forced me to be human again, made me eat meals, made me sleep. Watched Lily while I went to therapy. Did it help, the therapy? Some. Mostly I just learned that you can't run from your feelings forever. Eventually you have to stop and actually deal with them. Ethan felt something twist in his chest. I don't think I know how to do that anymore. Then learn. You're smart, right? Built a billion-dollar company? Figure out what makes you happy and do more of it. Figure out what makes you miserable and do less of it. It's not complicated. It's just hard. You make it sound easy. I don't mean to. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, and I fail at it constantly. But I keep trying because Lily deserves a mom who's present and not just physically here. She looked at him. Your son deserves the same thing. The words hit harder than any business failure or divorce decree ever had, because she was right. Jake deserved better than a father who showed up physically but was mentally somewhere else, always checking his phone, always thinking about the next meeting, always one foot out the door. I don't know how to change, Ethan said quietly. Start small, show up tomorrow and be present with your kid. Don't check your phone, don't think about work, just be there. What if I can't? Then try again the next time. And the time after that. Nobody gets it perfect. You just keep showing up until showing up becomes habit. Ethan nodded, feeling something shift inside him. Not fixed. He wasn't naive enough to think one night of clarity would solve years of damage, but different. Cracked open somehow, letting in light. He pulled on his coat. Can I come back sometime? To see Lily, and you, and Ruth. Claire hesitated, and he could see her weighing the risks. Letting a billionaire into their lives. The potential for hurt. The inevitable moment when he'd remember he didn't actually belong in their world and would disappear back to his own. Maybe, she said finally, let's see if you actually show up first. I will. Rich guys make a lot of promises. I'm not going to promise anything I can't keep. She walked him to the door, unlocking the multiple deadbolts. Merry Christmas, Ethan.
Merry Christmas, Claire.
He walked down the 3 flights of stairs out into the cold night, snow crunching under his shoes. The city was finally quiet, everyone home, or at least somewhere warmer than the streets. Ethan stood on the sidewalk and pulled out his phone to call for a car, then stopped. He looked up at the building, at the window where he could still see the Christmas tree lights blinking. Somewhere up there, Claire was probably getting ready for bed, setting her alarm for her Christmas morning shift. Lily was dreaming whatever dreams 4-year-olds dream. Ruth was sleeping in the next room, her walker parked beside the bed, ready for another day of watching her daughter struggle and helping however she could. They had almost nothing by the world's standards, but they had everything that mattered. Ethan opened his email and started typing, standing in the snow, his fingers numb with cold. Jennifer, new project, top priority. I need you to research rental assistance programs, utility assistance, food security nonprofits, and scholarship funds for single mothers in Queens. And look into anonymous donation protocols. I want this kept quiet. No press releases. No tax deduction receipts with my name on them. Nothing that traces back to me. I'll explain more after Christmas. E. He sent the email and then made another decision. He opened his calendar and started blocking out time. Every other weekend, non-negotiable. Wednesday dinners, recurring. Morning coffee before work, twice a week. All marked Jake in his calendar. All color-coded red for absolute priority. All set to override any other meeting or obligation. Then he called his lawyer and left a voicemail asking to revisit the custody arrangement. Not because he wanted to fight Amanda, but because he wanted to be present. Properly present. The kind of father who actually showed up. Finally, he opened his text thread with Amanda and typed, I know it's late, but I want to be better. For Jake. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to figure it out. See you tomorrow at 8:30. I promise I'll be there. She wrote back immediately like she'd been awake. I hope you mean that. I do. He stood there for another moment, looking up at the building where a little girl had decided he needed rescuing, and her mother had decided to trust him, and her grandmother had decided to call him out on his bullshit. Then Ethan Calloway, 32-year-old billionaire, walking cautiously towards something that felt like hope for the first time in longer than he could remember, started the long walk home through the snow. The alarm went off at 5:30 on Christmas morning, and Claire wanted to throw it through the window. She slapped at her phone until the noise stopped, then lay there in the darkness, listening to her mother's breathing from the other twin bed squeezed into what was technically supposed to be a dining area. Outside, the city was still mostly asleep. Inside, every muscle in Claire's body screamed at her to stay horizontal for just 5 more minutes. She couldn't afford 5 more minutes. The diner opened at 6, and Marco, her manager, had made it abundantly clear that holiday shifts started on time or you could find another job. Never mind that she'd worked a double yesterday. Never mind that it was Christmas. Bills didn't care about holidays, and neither did landlords. Claire pulled herself upright and immediately stepped on one of Lily's toy cars. She bit back a curse, hopping on one foot while reaching for her phone to use as a flashlight. The apartment looked different in the pre-dawn darkness. Smaller somehow, all the cheerful decorations reduced to shadows and shapes. She crept past the curtain separating Lily's sleeping area, past her mother's bed, into the bathroom the size of a closet. The shower sputtered cold water for 30 seconds before finally warming up. Claire stood under the weak spray and tried not to think about last night. Except she couldn't stop thinking about it. A billionaire had sat on her couch. A billionaire had eaten her terrible reheated chicken and acted like it was the best meal he'd ever had. A billionaire had let Lily fall asleep on his shoulder and hadn't complained once, even though his expensive coat was probably covered in kid drool. It felt surreal in daylight, or pre-daylight, whatever this counted as. Claire dressed in her diner uniform, black pants that were getting thin at the knees, white button-up shirt that she'd bleached so many times it was starting to yellow, comfortable shoes that looked like hell but kept her feet from screaming after 8-hour shifts. She pulled her hair into a ponytail and looked at herself in the mirror. 30 years old, 3 years single, 3 jobs, 1 kid, 0 prospects. She thought about Ethan's face when he'd admitted he didn't know how to change, the exhaustion in his voice, the way he'd looked at Lily like she was performing miracles just by being a normal kid. Rich people, Claire had learned from her ex-husband, were fundamentally broken in ways that money made worse instead of better. Marcus had started out sweet, charming, attentive, full of big plans. Then the money came, the promotion, the company credit card, and suddenly he'd decided that a 23-year-old receptionist with legs for days was a better investment than the wife who'd supported him through business school. She'd promised herself never again. Never let wealth anywhere near her life. Never trust someone who had so much that losing everything still meant landing softly. So why had she let Ethan Calloway stay? Because Lily asked. That was the simple answer. Her daughter had looked at a stranger and decided he needed help, and Claire had spent 4 years teaching her that you help people who need help. She couldn't very well contradict that lesson just because the person in question had more money than sense. But the complicated answer, the one Claire didn't want to examine too closely, was that she'd looked at Ethan and seen something she recognized, that specific kind of drowning that happens when you're going through all the motions but nothing connects anymore. She'd lived in that space after Marcus left. She knew what it looked like. Claire grabbed her coat and backpack, locked the apartment quietly, and headed down the stairs. The building was silent except for Mrs. Rodriguez on the second floor, whose TV was always on, 24 hours a day, tuned to some Spanish-language news channel. Claire had stopped wondering whether the old woman ever slept. Outside, the snow from last night had turned to gray slush in the streets, but on the sidewalks and cars, it still looked almost pretty in the orange glow of streetlights. Christmas morning in Queens. A handful of people were already out, someone walking a dog, a guy in scrubs heading toward the subway, probably pulling the same holiday shift Claire was about to start. The walk to the diner took 15 minutes. Claire used the time to mentally prepare herself for whatever chaos Christmas breakfast would bring. Families who didn't want to cook, people with nowhere else to go, the occasional drunk still riding yesterday's party. Tips would be good at least. People felt generous on Christmas, or guilty, or some combination of both. The diner was called Mike's, though Mike had been dead for 6 years and his son Tony had taken over without bothering to change the sign. It was the kind of place that smelled permanently like coffee and bacon grease, with red vinyl booths that had been patched so many times they were more duct tape than vinyl. But the food was decent and cheap and Tony paid on time, which made it better than half the places Claire had worked. She pushed through the door at 5:57 and found Marco already behind the counter, looking annoyed about having to be there. "Morning," Claire said, dropping her stuff in the back and grabbing her apron. "You're late." "I'm 3 minutes early." "Early is on time. On time is late." Claire bit her tongue and started setting up her section. Marco was 24 and had gotten the manager position because he was Tony's nephew, not because he had any actual management skills. He liked to throw around corporate speak he'd learned from YouTube videos and treat the staff like they were personally responsible for every problem in his life. The morning started slow but picked up fast. By 7:30, Claire was juggling 6 tables and a line of takeout orders. Coffee refills, scrambled eggs, pancakes, hash browns. More coffee. Someone's kid threw up in booth 7. Someone else complained their bacon was too crispy. An old man tried to pay with a $50 bill from 1985 and got offended when Marco said they couldn't accept it. Claire smiled through all of it, smiled until her face hurt. Smiled while her feet throbbed and her lower back seized up and the coffee pot grew heavier with each refill. Around 10, a family came in. Mom, dad, 3 kids all under 8. They were loud and messy, and the kids couldn't agree on anything, and the parents looked like they were one meltdown away from a divorce. Claire brought coloring sheets and crayons without being asked, complimented the youngest kid's drawing even though it was just scribbles, and snuck the middle kid some extra whipped cream on her hot chocolate. When they left, the mother pressed a $20 bill into Claire's hand along with the regular tip. "Thank you," she said, and she looked like she meant it. "You probably have kids at home you should be with instead of here." "Just one, and she's fine, still sleeping probably." The woman squeezed her hand. "You're a good mom. Merry Christmas." Claire watched them leave, the family piling into a minivan plastered with bumper stickers, still arguing about whether they were going to Grandma's or Aunt Susan's. The 20 burned in her pocket. That was dinner for 3 days if she stretched it. Or it was new shoes for Lily, whose current pair had a hole forming in the sole. Or it was $40 toward the electric bill that was already 2 weeks overdue. She folded it carefully and tucked it into her apron next to the other tips. Her shift ended at 2. Marco made her stay until 2:15 to help clean up, unpaid, because that's what team players do. Claire changed out of her uniform, collected her tips, $73 total, not bad for an 8-hour shift, and walked back out into the afternoon. The temperature had dropped and the slush was freezing into treacherous patches of ice. Claire walked carefully, thinking about getting home to Lily, maybe watching a movie together, making something nice for dinner with the extra tip money. Lily had been angling for mac and cheese from the box, the fancy organic kind that cost $3 more than the store brand, but that she insisted tasted better. Maybe Claire would splurge. She was half a block from her building when she saw the car. It was parked in front of her apartment, a black SUV that cost more than Claire would make in 5 years, completely out of place among the dented Hondas and ancient Toyotas that lined the street. As Claire approached, the driver's side door opened. Ethan Calloway stepped out. He looked different in daylight, more real somehow. Less like a figure from a dream, and more like an actual person who'd actually sat on her couch last night. He wore jeans and a sweater under his coat, dressed down but still managing to look expensive in that way wealthy people always did. When he saw her, his expression shifted into something uncertain. "Hi," he said. Claire stopped walking. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see if you were home. I brought something. For Lily. You don't even know her." "I know, but she helped me last night. I wanted to say thank you properly." Claire looked at the SUV. Through the tinted windows, she could see shapes, bags, boxes, something large wrapped in paper. Her stomach dropped. "Tell me you didn't buy her a bunch of expensive stuff." Ethan had the grace to look embarrassed. "I might have gotten carried away. Take it back." "What?" "Whatever's in that car, take it back, return it. We don't need your charity." His face fell. "It's not charity. It's a gift. From a stranger who has more money than problems. That's called charity." Claire could feel anger rising, hot and familiar. She'd dealt with this before. Marcus's family, after the divorce, trying to give Lily things, expensive things, like you could make up for a deadbeat father with American Girl dolls and private school tuition offers. "We don't need you to swoop in and save us. We're doing fine. I wasn't trying to—" "Oh!" "What? You weren't trying to make yourself feel better by playing Santa to the poor people?" "That's exactly what you're doing." Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You're right. I'm sorry. I should have asked first." The simple acknowledgement took the wind out of Claire's anger. She'd been prepared for him to argue or get defensive or pull the "I'm just trying to help" routine that wealthy people loved. The immediate apology threw her off. "I didn't mean to overstep," Ethan continued. "Last night meant something to me. A lot, actually. And I wanted to do something to say thank you, but I understand if it's unwelcome." Claire sighed and adjusted her backpack. Her feet hurt. Her back hurt. She was exhausted and hungry and didn't have the energy for whatever this was. "Look, I appreciate the thought. I do. But you have to understand, people like you, with money, you come into situations like ours and you think you're helping. But what happens when you leave? When you get bored of playing poor people advocate and go back to your real life? Lily gets attached to things she can't keep. I get used to help I can't rely on. And when you disappear, we're worse off than before." "What if I don't disappear?" Everyone disappears eventually.
Not everyone? In my experience? Yeah,
Everyone. They stood there on the sidewalk while people walked past, while life happened around them. A kid rode by on a bike too small for him. Somewhere nearby, someone was playing Christmas music too loud. Finally, Ethan said, "Can I at least meet Lily? Give her one thing? Not the car full of stuff, just one thing. And then if you want me to leave and never come back, I will." Claire wanted to say no. Wanted to protect her daughter from disappointment and herself from hope. But she thought about last night, about Lily's face when she'd invited the stranger to Christmas, about the way Ethan had held her when she fell asleep like it was the most natural thing in the world. "One thing," Claire said, "and you come up for 10 minutes. That's it." Relief washed over Ethan's face. "Thank you." He pulled a bag from the SUV. Not one of the large boxes Claire had spotted, but a simple shopping bag from a bookstore. They walked up the 3 flights together in silence. Claire unlocked the apartment and found Lily at the kitchen table in her pajamas, surrounded by crayons and paper, while Ruth watched from the couch. "Ethan!" Lily shrieked, abandoning her drawing and running over to throw her arms around his legs. Ethan looked startled by the enthusiastic greeting, but recovered quickly, kneeling down to her level. "Hey, Lily, Merry Christmas! You came back! I told Mom you would come back, but she said probably not because rich people are busy." "Lily," Claire warned. "What? That's what you said." Ruth was watching from the couch with that sharp, assessing look. "Back already, billionaire boy?" "I brought something for Lily, if that's okay." "We'll see about that." Ruth gestured at the couch. "Sit down before you hover like a burglar." Ethan sat. Lily immediately climbed up next to him, vibrating with excitement. Claire stayed standing, arms crossed, ready to intervene if whatever came out of that bag was ridiculous. "So," Ethan said, pulling out a wrapped package, "I noticed last night that you like to draw." "I love to draw. I'm going to be an artist when I grow up, or a veterinarian, or maybe a chef." "Those are all good options." "Well, I thought you might like this." Lily tore into the wrapping paper with the focused intensity of a child on Christmas. Inside was a large sketchbook, professional quality, thick paper, spiral bound, and a set of drawing pencils in a wooden case. "Whoa," Lily breathed, running her hands over the sketchbook like it was precious. "This is the fancy kind. The lady at the art store said it was good for beginners who are serious about drawing." Lily looked up at him with enormous eyes. "I'm very serious about drawing." "I could tell." Claire felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. It wasn't a laptop or a tablet or anything absurdly expensive. It was thoughtful, age-appropriate, something Lily would actually use. She met Ethan's eyes, and he must have seen something shift in her expression because he smiled slightly, cautiously. "Can I draw you?" Lily asked. "I'm not very good at people yet, but I'm practicing." "I would be honored." Lily positioned him on the couch and made him sit very still while she settled cross-legged on the floor with her new sketchbook. Ruth watched the whole scene with amusement. Claire finally sat down, dropping her backpack by the door. "You eat yet?" Ruth asked her. "I'll grab something in a minute." "There's leftover chicken in the fridge. You should eat now before you forget and then complain about being hungry at midnight." "I don't do that." "You absolutely do that." Claire heated up leftovers while Lily drew with total concentration, occasionally looking up to study Ethan's face and then returning to her paper with fierce determination. Ethan sat perfectly still, trying not to smile, clearly charmed despite himself. "You can move a little," Lily informed him. "You're not a statue." "Are you sure?" "I don't want to ruin your art." "You can't ruin art." "Ms. Rodriguez says art is just expressing yourself and there's no wrong way to express yourself." "Miss Rodriguez sounds smart." "She is. She's my art teacher. She has purple hair and 7 earrings in one ear, and she says I have natural talent." "I believe it." Claire ate standing at the counter, watching them. Ruth caught her eye and raised an eyebrow, a silent question. Claire shrugged back, equally uncertain about what was happening. After 20 minutes, Lily declared the portrait finished and held it up proudly. Ethan's face in pencil was recognizable but slightly lopsided, one eye bigger than the other, his mouth crooked. It was exactly what you'd expect from a 4-year-old with natural talent, but no technical skill yet. "It's perfect," Ethan said, and he sounded like he meant it. "You can keep it." "Really?" "Yeah, as a present. Because you gave me the fancy sketchbook, so I give you art. Ethan took the drawing like it was something precious, studying it carefully. I'll hang it up. In my office. You promise? I promise. Lily beamed and immediately started a new drawing, this time of Ruth, who grumbled but sat up straighter, clearly pleased to be included. Claire walked Ethan to the door. Out in the hallway, away from Lily's ears, she said quietly, "That was good. The gift, thank you." I wasn't sure. The woman at the store helped me. I told her I needed something for a 4-year-old who likes art, and she walked me through options for like an hour. You spent an hour picking out a sketchbook? I wanted to get it right. He paused. I meant what I said earlier, about not disappearing. I know you don't believe me yet, but I want to be in Lily's life. In your life. If you'll let me. Why? Because last night was the first time in years I felt like a real person instead of a walking bank account. He looked back toward the apartment where they could hear Lily chattering at Ruth. I don't have a lot of friends, not real ones. My ex-wife barely talks to me. My son is 6 and I'm already losing him because I can't figure out how to be present. And then your daughter looked at me and decided I was worth saving, and your family let me in. And for a few hours I remembered what it felt like to just be human. Claire studied his face. He looked exhausted and honest and a little desperate. Okay, she said finally. Okay? You can visit, sometimes, when I'm not working, but no more gifts without asking first. And if you hurt Lily, if you let her get attached and then vanish, I will find a way to make your life hell. I don't care how much money you have. Understood. I'm serious, Ethan. She's already lost one father. I won't let her lose another one. The words hung in the air between them. Claire hadn't meant to go there, hadn't meant to acknowledge what this could become. But it was out now, and she couldn't take it back. Ethan's expression shifted into something softer. I won't hurt her, I promise. Don't make promises you can't keep. Then I'll keep it. They stood there in the hallway with its peeling paint and flickering overhead light. Finally, Claire said, You should probably go. I'm sure you have things to do. Actually, I'm picking up Jake at 8:30. I was wondering if maybe sometime this week you'd let me bring him by? To meet Lily? You want our kids to meet? I think they'd like each other. And it might be good for Jake to spend time with other kids outside of his usual circle. Most of his friends are... Ethan trailed off, searching for the right word. Rich? Claire supplied. I was going to say isolated, but yeah, rich. Claire considered it. There were approximately 800 ways this could go wrong. But there was also something appealing about the idea of Lily having another kid to play with, especially during Christmas break when most of her school friends were away visiting family or doing things that required money Claire didn't have. Friday, she said. I'm off in the afternoon. You can bring him by around 3 for 2 hours. Thank you. And Ethan, don't tell him about our situation. I don't want your son thinking we're some charity case. He won't. I'll just say Lily's a friend. Is she? A friend? I hope so. Claire nodded and went back inside. Through the door, she heard Ethan's footsteps heading down the stairs. She leaned against the wall for a moment, wondering what the hell she was doing inviting this kind of complication into their lives. Ruth called from the living room, You okay out there? Yeah, just thinking. That's dangerous at your age. Claire came back in to find Lily had abandoned drawing Ruth in favor of drawing something that looked like a house with approximately 30 windows and a rainbow coming out of the chimney. Is Ethan coming back? Lily asked without looking up. Friday. He's bringing his son. I have a friend coming over? Lily's head snapped up, eyes wide. I need to clean my room, and we should make cookies. Can we make cookies, Mom? We'll see. That means no. That means we'll see. Ruth laughed from the couch. You're in over your head with this one, Claire Bear. Tell me about it. The rest of Christmas passed quietly. Claire made boxed mac and cheese for dinner, the fancy kind, and they watched The Muppet Christmas Carol for the 100th time. Lily fell asleep early, exhausted from excitement and too much sugar. Ruth went to bed not long after, leaving Claire alone with her thoughts and the string of Christmas lights blinking in the corner. She pulled out her phone and stared at the screen for a long time before finally typing out a text to her ex-husband Marcus. Merry Christmas. Lily's doing great. Wanted you to know in case you cared. She deleted it without sending. Marcus hadn't asked about Lily in 8 months. If he wanted to know how his daughter was doing, he had her number. She wasn't going to beg him to be a father. Instead, she opened her banking app and looked at her account balance. After setting aside money for rent and utilities, she had $92 to get them through the next 2 weeks until her next paycheck. It would be tight but manageable if nothing unexpected happened. Something unexpected always happened. Claire's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Ethan. Jennifer gave me your number. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to say thank you again for today." Jake loved the drawing Lily made. He wants to know if she likes dinosaurs because he's very serious about dinosaurs. Claire smiled despite herself. "She likes everything. Tell Jake we can compare notes on Friday." "Will do. Sleep well, Claire." She put her phone down and sat in the darkness, listening to the buildings settle around her, listening to Lily's soft breathing from behind the curtain, listening to her mother's snoring from the other room. Rich people were dangerous. They came into your life and made everything seem possible, and then they left and you remembered why you'd stopped believing in possibilities in the first place. But Ethan Calloway had sat on her couch and let Lily fall asleep on his shoulder, had spent an hour picking out the right sketchbook, had looked at her daughter's wonky drawing like it was a masterpiece. Maybe he was different. Maybe he'd actually stay. Or maybe Claire was setting herself up for heartbreak. She'd find out Friday. The week between Christmas and New Year existed in a strange limbo. Not quite holiday, not quite normal life, everyone floating in the space between celebration and obligation. Claire worked her usual rotation, early shifts at the diner, afternoons at the phone store, 3 nights cleaning offices. The rhythm of it kept her from overthinking what Friday meant, kept her too busy to second-guess letting Ethan back into their lives. Lily, on the other hand, thought about nothing else.
"What if Jake doesn't like me?" she asked Tuesday morning while Claire braided her hair. "Then he has terrible taste." "Mom, I'm serious." "So am I. You're great. If he doesn't see that, it's his loss." "What if he's mean?" "Then we'll deal with it. But I don't think his dad would bring him over if he was mean."
Wednesday afternoon, Lily reorganized her stuffed animals 17 times, trying to find the perfect arrangement. "Do you think he likes games? Should we play Candyland? Or maybe we should draw? I'm really good at drawing now with my fancy pencils." "Lily, just be yourself. That's enough." "What if myself isn't enough?" Claire stopped folding laundry and looked at her daughter. "Where's this coming from?" Lily shrugged, suddenly very interested in Mr. Button's ear. "Maya at school said her dad doesn't visit anymore because she's boring. What if I'm boring too?" Claire's heart broke a little. She pulled Lily into her lap, something that was getting harder now that her daughter was growing so fast. "Maya's dad doesn't visit because he's making bad choices. It has nothing to do with Maya being boring, and you are not boring. You're funny and smart and creative and kind. Any kid would be lucky to be your friend. Even rich kids? Especially rich kids. They probably need good friends more than anyone." Thursday night, Claire deep cleaned the apartment despite Ruth's protests that everything was fine. She scrubbed the bathroom until it gleamed, vacuumed every corner, organized Lily's books, and tried not to think about how Ethan's penthouse probably had more square footage than this entire building. "You're spiraling," Ruth observed from the couch. "I'm cleaning." "You're spiraling while cleaning. There's a difference. What if this is a mistake, letting him into our lives? What if it's not?" "You're not helping, Mom." Ruth struggled up from the couch with her walker and made her way to the kitchen where Claire was scrubbing counters that were already clean. "Listen to me. You've spent 3 years protecting Lily from every possible hurt. That's good parenting, but you can't protect her from everything, and you can't protect yourself from everything either." "I'm not trying to—" "You are. Ever since Marcus, you've kept everyone at arm's length. You work yourself to death, you take care of Lily, you take care of me, but you don't let anyone take care of you. This Ethan boy, he wants to try. Maybe let him. What if he leaves? Then he leaves, and you pick up the pieces, same as you always do. But what if he stays? What if this is the start of something good? You gonna miss out on that because you're scared?" Claire stopped scrubbing. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just don't listen." Friday afternoon arrived too fast and too slow. Claire got off her morning shift at the diner, went home to shower and change, and tried to convince herself this was normal. Just 2 kids playing. No big deal. At exactly 3 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Claire opened it to find Ethan standing there with a little boy holding his hand. Jake Calloway had his father's dark hair and something of his features, but his expression was more open, less guarded. He wore jeans and a t-shirt with a T-Rex on it, and he looked terrified. "Hi," Ethan said. "Hope we're not early." "Right on time." Claire stepped back. "Come in." Lily had been waiting by the curtain to her room, but now she emerged slowly, suddenly shy. The two children stared at each other.
"Lily, this is Jake," Claire said. "Jake, this is Lily." "Hi," Lily whispered. "Hi," Jake whispered back. An awkward silence stretched out. Both kids looked at their respective parents like they were hoping for rescue. Finally, Lily said, "Do you really like dinosaurs?" Jake's face lit up. "I love dinosaurs. My favorite is Ankylosaurus because it has a club tail and armor plates, and it could defend itself from predators without being scary itself. I like Brachiosaurus because it has a long neck and it eats plants and it's gentle." "Brachiosaurus is cool. Did you know its nostrils were on top of its head?" "Really? That's weird. Why?" "Scientists think maybe so it could breathe while eating from tall trees, or maybe for smelling things far away." And just like that, they were off, disappearing behind Lily's curtain, voices rising in animated discussion about the Triassic period and whether pterodactyls counted as dinosaurs. Claire and Ethan looked at each other. "Well," Claire said, "that was easier than expected. Jake's been reading dinosaur books for 3 days straight, preparing for this." Lily reorganized her stuffed animals 17 times. They stood there smiling, relieved, and then Ethan said, "Is it okay if I stay? Or would you rather I come back in 2 hours?" "You can stay, but fair warning, the entertainment options here are limited." "I think I'll manage." Ruth appeared from her room, freshly dressed, makeup on. "Is that the rich boy? Let me see him properly." "We've met Mrs. Bennett," Ethan said. "I know that, but last time you showed up on Christmas Eve looking like a sad puppy. I want to see if you clean up decent." Ethan laughed, genuinely amused. "Do I pass inspection?" Ruth circled him with her walker, making a show of looking him up and down. "You'll do. Still too skinny. Claire, make him something to eat." "Mom, I'm not. He's a guest. We feed guests. That's how civilized people behave." Claire rolled her eyes, but found herself pulling out leftovers anyway. Ethan tried to protest, but Ruth shut him down with a look that probably worked on everyone from bank presidents to heads of state. They ended up sitting around the small table, Claire, Ethan, and Ruth, while the kids played behind the curtain. It felt surprisingly normal. Ruth asked Ethan about his business, and he explained it in terms that actually made sense instead of drowning them in tech jargon. Claire listened while cutting vegetables for dinner, contributing occasionally, mostly just observing. "So you make programs that help other programs talk to each other," Ruth clarified. "Basically, yeah, it's boring but profitable." "Nothing that makes $3 billion is boring, boy. It might be incomprehensible, but it's not boring." Fair point. The conversation drifted. Ruth told stories about Claire as a kid, which Claire tried to shut down, but Ruth powered through anyway. Ethan talked about growing up in Chicago, about his mother who'd passed away when he was 20, about not really knowing his father. There was something careful in the way he shared information. Not quite guarded, but not fully open either, like he was testing how much trust to extend. Around 4:30, Jake emerged from behind the curtain, Lily right behind him. "Dad, can we make cookies?" Jake asked. "That's up to Ms. Bennett." "We have ingredients," Lily added quickly. "And I know the recipe. Grandma taught me." Claire looked at the hopeful faces of both children. "Fine, but you two do the work. I'm supervising, not baking." What followed was controlled chaos. Lily directed Jake through Ruth's sugar cookie recipe while Claire and Ethan tried to keep flour contained, and Ruth shouted instructions from the couch. The kids measured ingredients with varying degrees of accuracy, argued about whether to use the electric mixer or stir by hand, and somehow got butter in Jake's hair. "How did you even manage that?" Ethan asked, trying to wipe it out with a dish towel. "I don't know. It just happened. Butter doesn't just happen into hair." "This butter did." Lily dissolved into giggles. Jake joined in. Soon both kids were laughing so hard they couldn't stand up straight, leaning against each other for support, the friendship solidifying in that mysterious way childhood friendships do, instant and absolute. Claire caught Ethan's eye. He looked happy. Actually happy.
Not the performative version people put on for social media or business dinners. His whole face had relaxed, the tension she'd noticed on Christmas Eve completely gone. The cookies went into the oven. The kids settled on the floor to play with Lily's toys, while the adults cleaned up the considerable mess. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly, washing a mixing bowl, "for letting me bring him. He's been talking about this all week." Lily, too, I think she was more nervous than he was. Jake's shy. He doesn't make friends easily. Lily used to be more outgoing before her dad left. She got cautious after that. They worked side by side in the tiny kitchen, falling into an easy rhythm. Claire washed, Ethan dried. Ruth dozed on the couch. From the living room came the sound of the kids' voices, playing something that involved both dinosaurs and Lily's stuffed animals, creating an elaborate narrative only they understood. "I saw Jake yesterday," Ethan said after a while. "Spent the whole day with him. No phone, no work. Just us." "How was it?" "Hard. I kept wanting to check my email, but I didn't. And around hour 4, something shifted. He started actually talking to me. Real stuff, not just one-word answers. He told me about school, about his friends, about how sometimes he gets scared at night and wants to call me but doesn't because he thinks I'm always busy." Ethan's voice cracked slightly on the last part. Claire resisted the urge to reach out, to offer comfort. They weren't there yet. Maybe never would be. "That must have been rough to hear," she said instead. "It was, but it was also necessary. I've been so absent from his life. He's learned not to need me. How do you fix that?" "You show up, consistently, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple." The cookies came out of the oven golden and slightly misshapen. The kids decorated them with store-brand frosting and too many sprinkles, creating masterpieces that tasted like sugar and butter and childhood. They ate cookies warm, and everyone got sugar high and silly. At 6:30, Ethan checked his watch reluctantly. "We should probably go. Amanda wanted Jake home by 7 for dinner." "Already?" Lily's face fell. "But we didn't finish building the dinosaur city." "We can finish next time," Jake said. "There's going to be a next time?" Both kids looked at their respective parents hopefully. "If it's okay with Ms. Bennett," Ethan said. Claire looked at Lily's pleading face, at Jake's quiet hope, at Ethan's careful neutrality that didn't quite hide what he wanted. She thought about her mother's words, about protection versus isolation, about the risk of letting people in versus the certainty of keeping them out. "Next Friday works," she heard herself say. "Same time." Lily and Jake cheered and immediately started planning what they'd do next time, talking over each other in their excitement. Ethan pulled on his coat, and Claire walked them to the door. "Thank you," Ethan said again. "This was the best day I've had in a long time." "You're setting the bar pretty low if cookies with 4-year-olds counts as the best day." 6-year-old, Jake's 6. "Point stands." Ethan smiled. "Maybe my bar needed to be lower. Maybe I've been measuring the wrong things." He left, Jake waving over his shoulder until they turned the corner of the stairwell. Claire stood in the doorway long after they disappeared, listening to their footsteps fade, wondering what she'd just started and whether she'd regret it. Behind her, Lily said, "Mom, I really like Jake." "I could tell, baby." "Do you think Ethan's nice?" Claire turned to look at her daughter. "Yeah, I think he is." "Good. Because I think he needs friends too, not just me. Friends his age. Like you." "Lily, just saying." Lily skipped back to her room to admire the unfinished dinosaur city. Ruth, awake now, raised an eyebrow at Claire. "Out of the mouths of babes." "Don't start." "I'm not starting anything, just noting that your daughter might be smarter than both of us." Claire cleaned up the cookie mess and tried not to think too hard about what any of this meant. Tried not to think about how easy it had been having Ethan in their space, how natural it felt, how much she'd laughed. Her phone buzzed, a text from Ethan. "Jake hasn't stopped talking about Lily. Thank you for today. See you next Friday?" Claire stared at the message for a long time before responding. "See you Friday." She put her phone down and looked around her small, messy, imperfect apartment, at the crayon drawings on the fridge, at the Christmas tree still blinking in the corner even though it was almost New Year's, at her daughter's curtained-off corner that passed for a bedroom, at her mother's walker parked by the couch. This was her life. Small and complicated and full of love. And maybe,
Just maybe, there was room in it for something more. Friday became a routine so quickly it felt like it had always existed. By mid-January, Ethan was showing up at Claire's apartment every week with Jake in tow, and the kids would disappear behind Lily's curtain while the adults navigated the strange territory of becoming something more than strangers but not quite friends. Not yet. There was too much unspoken, too much carefully avoided, too many questions neither of them knew how to ask. The third Friday in January, Ethan arrived 20 minutes early. Claire was still in her phone store uniform when she opened the door, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. No makeup, exhausted from dealing with customers who thought she personally controlled which phones were in stock. She looked at Ethan and Jake standing in the hallway and felt momentarily embarrassed before remembering she didn't owe anyone performance-ready appearances. "You're early," she said. "I know, sorry. Meeting ended sooner than expected, and Jake was bouncing off the walls, so I figured—" Ethan stopped. "We can come back if you need time." "No, it's fine. Come in. Just ignore the chaos." The apartment was in its usual state of lived-in disorder. Lily's drawings covered every flat surface. Ruth's medications were lined up on the kitchen counter next to breakfast dishes Claire hadn't had time to wash. The laundry basket sat in the corner, clean clothes waiting to be folded for 3 days now. Jake didn't notice or care. He kicked off his shoes and called for Lily, who emerged from behind her curtain in pajama pants and a shirt with a unicorn on it, her hair sticking up at odd angles. "You're here!" she shrieked, and they were off, racing to her corner to continue whatever elaborate game they'd started last week. Ethan stood in the middle of the living room, looking uncertain. "I really can go if this is a bad time." "It's fine. I need to change anyway. Just make yourself comfortable. There's coffee if you want it." Claire grabbed clean clothes and locked herself in the bathroom. She could hear Ethan moving around the kitchen, the sound of the coffee maker, cabinet doors opening and closing. He'd been here enough times now to know where things were. That thought settled somewhere in her chest, warm and unsettling in equal measure. When she emerged 10 minutes later in jeans and a sweater, Ethan had washed her breakfast dishes and was wiping down the counter. "You don't have to do that," Claire said. "I know, but I was standing around feeling useless, so—" He shrugged. "Hope that's okay." "It's weird, but okay." "Weird how?" Claire poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter. "People don't usually show up to my apartment and start cleaning. People don't usually let me show up to their apartment at all." "What do you mean?" Ethan rinsed the dish rag and draped it over the faucet with the careful precision of someone who'd been taught to clean up after himself but didn't do it often enough for it to be automatic. "After the divorce, most of my friendships sort of evaporated. Turns out half of them were Amanda's friends who were nice to me, and the other half were business contacts who wanted something. The few actual friends I had got tired of me canceling plans for work emergencies. So now it's pretty much just me and Jake, and occasionally my assistant Jennifer, who I'm pretty sure only tolerates me because I pay her really well." "That's depressing." "Little bit, yeah." They stood in the kitchen drinking coffee while the kids' voices rose and fell from behind the curtain. Something about a dragon and a castle, and whether dinosaurs could be knights. Ruth was at her weekly doctor's appointment, one of the few times Claire had the apartment without her mother's sharp observations and sharper commentary. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said after a while. "Depends what it is." "Why do you work 3 jobs?" Claire tensed. "Because one job doesn't pay the bills. But 3 jobs means you're working what? 60 hours a week? 70? Closer to 70? Sometimes more? That's not sustainable." "You think I don't know that?" The words came out harsher than she intended. "You think I wake up every morning excited about waitressing in retail and scrubbing office toilets? I do it because my daughter needs to eat. Because the rent doesn't care if I'm tired. Because—" She stopped, realizing she was yelling. The apartment had gone quiet. Even the kids had stopped talking. "I'm sorry," Ethan said quietly. "I wasn't judging. I was asking because I want to help. I don't need your money. I know you don't need it. But what if I could offer you something else? Not charity, an actual job." Claire set her coffee down carefully. "What kind of job?" "My company needs someone to manage community outreach, programs for underprivileged kids, partnerships with schools, that kind of thing. It's real work, 40 hours a week, benefits, salary that would let you quit the other 3 jobs. And I think you'd be good at it."
You think I'd be good at it based on what? Watching me parent for a month? Based on watching you work 3 jobs and still show up for your kid? Based on how you talk to her, how you talk to strangers, how you see people? That's the skill set we need. Claire felt something hot and uncomfortable rise in her throat. You're offering me a job because you feel sorry for me. I'm offering you a job because you're qualified and because my company actually needs someone in that role. We've been trying to fill it for 6 months. Bullshit. You could hire anyone, someone with a degree, someone with experience. I could hire someone with an MBA who's never struggled a day in their life and has no idea how to actually connect with the communities we're trying to serve. Or I could hire someone who knows what it's like to choose between electricity and groceries. Ethan met her eyes. I'm not trying to rescue you, Claire. I'm trying to hire the right person for a job. And if this thing between us doesn't work out, if we have a fight or you get sick of slumming it with the poor people, then what? I quit 3 jobs for 1 job working for you, and suddenly I'm out of work because things got awkward? Then you'd have 6 months severance minimum, full benefits continuation, and a reference letter that would get you hired anywhere, all in writing, all reviewed by a lawyer who isn't mine. Claire stared at him. You've really thought this through. I've thought about very little else for 2 weeks. The kids emerged from behind the curtain, Lily dragging a reluctant Jake. Mom, can we have snacks? We're building a kingdom, and kingdoms need food. There's crackers in the cabinet, and apples. Can we have cookies? We don't have any cookies. Lily's face fell with the tragic despair only a 4-year-old can muster over denied cookies. Jake, loyal friend that he'd become, looked equally devastated. How about I run to the store and get some? Ethan offered. What kind do you guys like? The ones with chocolate chips, Lily said immediately. Oreos, Jake added. Double stuff. I can get both. Claire, you want anything? She wanted to say no. Wanted to maintain some boundary, some separation between his money and her life. But she was tired, and there were approximately 8 things she needed from the store that she'd been putting off because groceries were expensive, and she'd already stretched this week's budget too thin. If you're going anyway, milk would be good. And bread, the cheap kind, not the fancy stuff. Ethan pulled out his phone and opened a notes app. What else? That's it. Claire. What? I'm going to the store. You clearly need more than milk and bread. Just tell me what you need. Something in his tone, not quite demanding, but firm, made her relent. She rattled off a list. Eggs, butter, the ingredients for spaghetti, dish soap, the specific brand of orange juice Lily liked. Ethan typed it all without comment, without the expression people sometimes got when they realized how carefully Claire had to budget every purchase. I'll be back in 20 minutes, he said, grabbing his coat. After he left, Lily said, I like Ethan. I know you do, baby. Do you like him? He's nice. That's not what I asked. Claire looked at her daughter, who had somehow become perceptive enough to ask uncomfortable questions. Yeah, I like him. Good. Because Jake says his dad is happier now, and you're happier too. I'm the same as always. No, you're not. You smile more, and you don't cry in the kitchen at night as much. Claire felt her throat tighten. She thought she was being quiet, thought Lily was asleep during those late-night moments when the weight of everything became too much, and she'd stand at the sink letting silent tears fall while she washed dishes or prepped lunches or just stared at nothing. I'm okay, Lily, I promise. I know, but it's okay to not be okay sometimes too. That's what you always tell me. The wisdom of it, coming from a 4-year-old, made Claire want to laugh and cry simultaneously. Instead, she pulled Lily into a hug and held on probably longer than necessary. Ethan returned with 3 bags of groceries, including the milk and bread and everything else on Claire's list, plus cookies for the kids and fancy coffee she definitely hadn't asked for, and a bouquet of bodega flowers that cost maybe $6 but felt like more. The flowers were on sale, he said, seeing her expression. Seemed like a waste not to grab them. Claire put them in a glass because she didn't own a vase and tried to ignore how the apartment looked a little less depressing with flowers on the table. The kids demolished half a package of Oreos while playing their kingdom game. Ethan helped Claire put groceries away, navigating her tiny kitchen like he'd been doing it for years instead of weeks. At some point, Ruth came home from her appointment and immediately zeroed in on the flowers. Who died? She asked. Nobody died, Mom. Ethan brought them. Flowers mean someone died or someone's in trouble. Which is it, billionaire boy? Neither. They were on sale. Ruth studied him suspiciously. You're either the worst liar I've ever met or the most honest rich person alive. Can't figure out which. I'll take that as a compliment. Wasn't meant as one. Despite her words, Ruth was smiling. She'd warmed to Ethan over the past month, though she still gave him grief at every opportunity. Claire suspected it was a test, seeing if he'd stick around when faced with a sharp-tongued elderly woman who didn't care about his money or his company or anything except whether he was good to her granddaughter. So far, he was passing. Around 6, Jake's phone buzzed, a call from Amanda. He answered with the careful politeness of a kid who'd been coached on phone etiquette. Hi, Mom. Yeah, we're still at Lily's. No, I didn't forget. Yes, Dad's here. Okay, I'll tell him. He handed the phone to Ethan. Mom wants to talk to you. Ethan stepped into the hallway, and even with the door closed, Claire could hear the murmur of his voice, the careful neutrality of someone navigating a difficult conversation with an ex-spouse. When he came back in, his expression was tight. We need to go, he said to Jake. Your mom wants you home for dinner. But we didn't finish the kingdom. I know, buddy. We'll finish next time. There's always a next time, Jake grumbled, but he started gathering his stuff. After they left, Lily said, Jake's mom doesn't like us. What makes you say that? Jake told me. He said his mom asked lots of questions about where we live and what his dad does here, and she made a face when he told her about the cookies. Claire felt something cold settle in her stomach. Of course, Amanda Calloway wouldn't like her ex-husband spending time in a rundown Queens apartment with a waitress and her kid. Of course she'd have questions. Concerns. Probably thought Claire was some kind of gold digger angling for Ethan's money. People have the right to be concerned about their kids, Claire said carefully. Jake's mom just wants to make sure he's safe. We're safe, though. I know we are, but she doesn't know that yet. Lily seemed to accept this logic and went back to her drawing. Ruth, however, fixed Claire with a knowing look. That's going to be a problem, Ruth said after Lily was out of earshot. What is? The ex-wife. Rich people don't like when their worlds collide with regular people worlds, makes them nervous. We're not doing anything wrong. Doesn't matter. You're a variable she can't control. That makes you a threat. Claire wanted to argue, but knew her mother was right. She'd seen it before with Marcus. The way his family had looked at her once money entered the picture, the subtle and not-so-subtle suggestions that she wasn't quite good enough, wasn't quite their class, wasn't quite the right fit. She'd promised herself she wouldn't go through that again. But this was different, wasn't it? Ethan wasn't Marcus. And this wasn't about money or status or any of the things that had poisoned her marriage. This was about two lonely people who'd found something unexpected in each other's company. At least, that's what Claire told herself. The job offer sat between them like a live grenade for the next week. Ethan didn't bring it up again, but Claire could feel it hovering every time they talked. She'd catch him watching her sometimes with an expression she couldn't quite read. Hope, maybe, or concern that he'd overstepped. She wanted to say yes. The salary he'd mentioned was more than all 3 of her current jobs combined. Benefits meant she could finally take Lily to the dentist without worrying about the bill. Retirement contributions meant she might actually have something saved when she was too old to work. But accepting meant tying herself to Ethan in a way that felt dangerous. If things went wrong, she wouldn't just lose a friend. She'd lose her income, her stability, everything she'd worked so hard to build. Tuesday night, Claire lay awake staring at the ceiling while Ruth snored from the other bed. Her phone sat on the floor beside her, Ethan's contact information open, the cursor blinking in an empty text message. She typed, "About the job offer," and then deleted it. Typed, "Can we talk about," and deleted that too. Finally settled on, "Are you free tomorrow afternoon? Need to discuss something." His response came immediately despite the late hour. "I'll make time. Coffee at that place near your apartment, 2 p.m.? See you then." Claire put her phone down and tried to sleep. Failed. Spent the next 5 hours running through every possible version of the conversation, every way it could go right or wrong, every logical reason to say yes balanced against every emotional reason to say no. By the time her alarm went off at 5:30, she'd made her decision. Then changed it. Then changed it back. The cafe was the same one where Lily had first invited Ethan into their lives. Claire arrived 10 minutes early and ordered a coffee she was too nervous to drink. Ethan showed up exactly at 2, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Claire's monthly rent, clearly having come straight from a meeting. "Hey," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Thanks for making time. I'm the one who asked to meet." "Right, sorry, nervous." "Why are you nervous?" "Because I think I know what you're going to say, and I'm worried I pushed too hard with the job thing." Claire wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "I want to say yes." Ethan's face lit up. "That's great, but I need you to understand something first. I don't do charity. I don't do handouts. If I take this job, it's because I'm actually qualified and you actually need someone, not because you're trying to make my life easier. You're qualified. We do need someone. And if things get weird between us, if we have a fight, or if you decide you don't want me around anymore, I need a guarantee that won't affect the job. Real guarantees, legal ones, already drawn up." Ethan pulled a folder from his bag and slid it across the table. "Employment contract. Standard terms, but with a clause that protects you from termination without cause for 18 months. After that, normal employment law applies, but you'd still get 6 months severance if we ever parted ways. There's also language about maintaining professional boundaries. Basically, our personal relationship, whatever it is or becomes, can't be grounds for termination." Claire flipped through the pages. The salary number made her stomach drop. "This is too much. It's market rate for the position. For someone with experience. I don't have experience. You have the experience that matters. You've lived the life of the people we're trying to help. That's worth more than any degree." Ethan leaned forward. "Claire, I've interviewed 12 candidates for this position. They all had perfect resumes and said all the right things, but none of them actually understood what it's like to be poor in America. They talked about disadvantaged communities like it was an abstract concept, not real people with real problems. You know the difference between milk money and rent money. You know what it's like to skip meals so your kid can eat. That knowledge is valuable." Claire felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back angrily. "You can't just say stuff like that." "Why not?" "Because it's too much. You're too much. You show up and you're nice to my kid and you clean my kitchen and you offer me dream jobs and you—" She stopped, struggling for words. "I don't know how to trust this. I don't know how to believe it's real." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. The gesture was so unexpected that Claire almost pulled away, but something in his expression stopped her. "I'm not Marcus," he said quietly. "I know you're not." "Do you?" "Because it feels like you're waiting for me to prove I'm just like him. Waiting for me to disappoint you so you can say you were right not to trust. That's not fair, isn't it? You won't let me help. You won't let me be part of your life except in carefully controlled doses. You keep me at arm's length even though we both know there's something here. Something good. And I understand why. I get that you've been hurt, but at some point you're going to have to decide whether to take a chance on me or keep protecting yourself from something that might never happen." Claire pulled her hand back. "You've known me for 6 weeks, 7, and I've learned more about who I want to be in those 7 weeks than I learned in the previous 10 years. That's not because of me. That's because you were ready to change. Maybe, but you showed me what I was missing. You and Lily and Ruth, you showed me what actually matters. And I don't want to go back to the person I was before. The person who measured everything in revenue and stock prices and business deals. I want to be someone Jake is proud of. Someone who shows up for the people he cares about." They sat in silence. Around them, the cafe hummed with conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine. Outside, the January afternoon was fading into early dusk. Finally, Claire said, "If I take this job and it doesn't work out, the job itself, not us, just the job, you have to promise you'll fire me. Actually fire me. Don't keep me on because you feel guilty or because of Lily. If I'm bad at it, let me go." "You won't be bad at it. Promise anyway. I promise. If you're genuinely terrible at the job, which you won't be, I will fire you with appropriate notice and severance." "Okay." Claire took a deep breath. "Then yes, I'll take the job." Ethan's smile was so bright it was almost painful to look at. "Really? Really? But I need to give 2 weeks' notice at my current jobs. Well, 3 jobs. That's going to take some coordination. Whatever you need. We can start you March 1st if that's easier." "March 1st works." They ironed out details: start date, benefits enrollment, what the job would actually entail. Ethan pulled up organizational charts on his phone, explaining where she'd fit in the company structure, who she'd be working with, what her first projects would be. Claire tried to absorb it all while simultaneously panicking about whether she was making a huge mistake. When they finally left the cafe, the sun had set completely. Ethan walked her back to her apartment building, even though it was out of his way. "Thank you," Claire said at the door, "for the opportunity and for not making it weird." "Of course. You're going to be great. You don't know that." "I do, though." They stood there at the cold, their breath fogging in the air between them. Claire thought about Ruth's warnings, about Amanda's concerns, about all the ways this could go wrong. But she also thought about Lily's smile when Ethan showed up, about Jake's growing confidence, about the flowers on her kitchen table and the groceries in her fridge and the way she'd laughed more in the past month than she had in 3 years. Maybe that was worth the risk. Friday came and went, then another Friday, and another. February arrived with a cold snap that froze the pipes in Claire's building for 3 days. Ethan showed up with space heaters and helped her file complaints with the landlord and made sure they had enough water for Lily's bath. He didn't make a big deal about it, just handled it like someone who'd appointed himself responsible for their comfort. Claire tried to be annoyed by it, tried to maintain her independence, failed spectacularly. Her last day at the diner was February 28th. Marco acted like she was personally betraying him by leaving, as if she owed him loyalty for the privilege of working there. The other waitresses threw her an impromptu party during the pre-lunch lull, gas station cupcakes, and a card they'd all signed. Maria, who'd been there 15 years, hugged her hard and said, "Get out while you can. Don't look back." Claire walked out of Mike's diner at 2:15 and stood on the sidewalk feeling unmoored. For 3 years, this job had been the anchor of her schedule. Wake up, get Lily ready, drop her at daycare, work the breakfast shift, pick up Lily, go to job number 2. The routine had been exhausting but reliable. Now she was stepping into the unknown. Her phone buzzed, a text from Ethan. "How'd it go?" "Weird. Good weird. Still processing."
"Want to celebrate? I can bring Jake over tonight. We'll order pizza." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to. Let us celebrate with you." Claire stared at the message. 6 weeks ago, she would have said no, would have insisted on handling this milestone alone, on not needing anyone. But that instinct felt tired now, felt like armor she'd been wearing so long she'd forgotten it was supposed to protect her, not isolate her. "Pizza sounds good. See you at 6. That night, they crammed into Claire's apartment. Ethan and Jake, Lily and Ruth, and Claire herself feeling strangely emotional about frozen pizza and 2-liter soda. The kids ate in Lily's corner while the adults attempted conversation between Ruth's running commentary on a game show and the general chaos of too many people in too little space. "You nervous about Monday?" Ethan asked. "Terrified." "Good. If you weren't nervous, I'd be worried." "That doesn't make me feel better." "It's not supposed to. It's supposed to be honest." He smiled. "You're going to be great, though." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." Ruth snorted from her recliner. "You two sound like a couple of teenagers. You're great." "No, you're great. Makes me want to vomit." "Mom!" "What?" "I'm just saying, if you're going to be disgustingly supportive of each other, at least do it somewhere I don't have to listen." Ethan laughed. "Noted, Mrs. Bennett." After dinner, after Jake and Lily had convinced them to play Candyland, after Ruth had gone to bed muttering about young people and their foolishness, after the kids had finally crashed from their sugar high, Claire walked Ethan to the door. "Thank you," she said, "for tonight, for everything." "You already thanked me." "I know, but I mean it. This whole thing, the job, the support, just showing up, it means a lot." Ethan leaned against the doorframe. "Can I tell you something?" "Okay." "I didn't offer you the job just because you're qualified, even though you are. I offered it because I'm selfish, and I wanted a reason to see you more, to be part of your life in a way that felt legitimate." Claire's breath caught. "Ethan, I know, too much, too soon. Story of my life lately. But I'm tired of pretending this is just about Lily and Jake being friends. I like you, Claire. I like who I am when I'm around you. And I hope, you might like me too." Her heart was racing. "This is complicated. I know. If we do this, if we're actually doing this, and it doesn't work out,
It affects everything. The job, the kids, all of it. I know that too. And you still want to try? I've spent the last 7 weeks trying not to want to try. Hasn't worked yet. Claire looked at him standing in her doorway, this billionaire who'd somehow become woven into the fabric of her small, messy life. She thought about all the reasons to say no, to keep things professional, to protect herself and Lily from potential heartbreak. Then she thought about the flowers on her table, about Jake and Lily's friendship, about the way she'd caught herself smiling at nothing because Ethan had texted her something funny, about how he'd shown up with space heaters during the pipe freeze and hadn't made her feel helpless or pitied, just cared for. Okay, she said. Okay? Let's try, but slow, really slow, because I'm still scared and I still don't completely trust this and I need time to figure out if it's real. Ethan's smile was worth every risk she was taking. Slow works for me. I'm pretty sure I'd wait forever if that's what you needed. That's dramatic. Little bit, but true. He left, and Claire closed the door and leaned against it, her heart still racing. From behind Lily's curtain came the soft sound of her daughter sleeping. From Ruth's room came snoring. The apartment was warm and quiet and full of the gentle chaos of her life. And somewhere in Manhattan, Ethan Calloway was probably driving home thinking about her the same way she was thinking about him. It was terrifying. It was also the most hopeful Claire had felt in 3 years. Monday morning, she put on the one professional outfit she owned, black pants and a blouse she'd bought at a thrift store, but that looked expensive enough, and took the subway into Manhattan for her first day at Callaway Technologies. The building was glass and steel, and so tall, Claire had to crane her neck to see the top. The lobby had marble floors and a security desk and people in suits moving with purpose. She felt completely out of place. Claire Bennett? A woman about her age approached, hand extended. I'm Jennifer Park, Ethan's assistant. He asked me to get you settled. Nice to meet you. Likewise. Come on, I'll show you to your office. Office. Claire had an office, with a door and a window and a desk that wasn't someone's kitchen table. Jennifer walked her through the building, pointing out the cafeteria and the gym and the daycare center Claire hadn't known existed. Wait, there's childcare? Subsidized for employees. Ethan implemented it 2 years ago. You have a kid, right? Yeah, Lily. She's 4. Bring her by next week. They have a waiting list, but Ethan can probably push her through. They reached the 14th floor. Jennifer led her through a maze of cubicles and offices to a corner space with Claire's name already on the door. Inside was a desk, a computer, a bookshelf, and a view of the city that made her feel like she was floating. This is mine? All yours. Computer's set up with your login. HR will be by around 10 to finish your paperwork. And Ethan wanted me to give you this. Jennifer handed her a folder. Your first project, Youth Coding Initiative in partnership with Queens Public Schools. He thought you might have insights given your background. Claire opened the folder and saw budgets and timelines and contact information for school administrators. Real work, meaningful work, the kind of thing that could actually make a difference. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank me, thank your boss. Jennifer smiled. Fair warning, though, he's intense about this stuff. He cares a lot about the community programs, probably more than the actual tech side of the business. So if you do good work here, you'll have his attention. If you don't, you'll also have his attention. Noted. Jennifer left. Claire sat at her desk and looked out the window at Manhattan stretching in all directions. Somewhere out there was her apartment in Queens. Somewhere closer was Ethan's office, probably several floors up in this same building. She pulled out her phone and texted him, I have a window. His response came immediately. Welcome to Callaway Technologies. Try not to spend all day staring out of it. No promises. Claire put her phone down and opened the folder Jennifer had given her. The coding initiative was ambitious, bringing computer science education to underserved schools, providing equipment and teachers and after-school programs. The budget made her head spin. The scope seemed impossible, and she couldn't wait to get started. The coding initiative launched on a Tuesday in late March, and everything that could go wrong did. The equipment shipment arrived at the wrong school. Half the volunteer teachers didn't show up. The principal at PS 114 had apparently never received the paperwork despite Claire having sent it 3 times. And one of the school board members chose that exact moment to raise concerns about outside corporate influence in public education. Claire stood in an empty classroom at 3:30 in the afternoon, surrounded by boxes of laptops that were supposed to be at a different location entirely, and felt the familiar weight of failure settling on her shoulders. Her phone rang. "Ethan." "How's it going?" he asked, sounding cautiously optimistic. "It's a disaster. Complete disaster. The equipment's at the wrong school, the volunteers are MIA, and I think we might have a political problem with the school board." "Okay, take a breath." "What do you need?" "A miracle or a time machine. Either works." "I can't do miracles, but I can get you a truck to move the equipment, and I can make some calls about the school board situation. What about the volunteers?" Claire looked at her notes. "I have contact info for all of them. I can call and figure out what happened." "Do that. I'll handle the logistics. We'll figure this out." "Ethan, maybe we should just postpone, regroup, try again next month when—" "No." His voice was firm, but not unkind. "First launches are always messy. If we postpone now, we lose momentum and credibility. We push through, we fix it, we make it work. You can do this, Claire." She wanted to argue, but he'd already hung up to make his calls. Claire stood there for another moment, then pulled herself together and started working the volunteer list. 20 phone calls later, she'd figured out the problem. A miscommunication about the start date that was partially her fault for not being clear in the confirmation emails. She got half of them to commit to Thursday instead and started recruiting backups for the others. By 6 o'clock, she'd coordinated the equipment transfer, smoothed things over with the principal at PS 114, and drafted a response to the school board concerns that Ethan's legal team could review. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional. The launch would happen Thursday instead of Tuesday, which meant 2 extra days of kids not getting access to the program, but at least it would happen. Claire locked up the classroom and headed for the subway, exhausted and wired simultaneously. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Heard you pulled it off." "Dinner to celebrate?" "My treat. You picked the place." She was too tired to cook and too wound up to go home and sit still. "There's a Thai place in Queens, nothing fancy. You sure you want to?" "Send me the address." The restaurant was called Somtum, and it occupied a narrow storefront between a laundromat and a bodega. Claire had discovered it during her retail job days when she needed cheap food fast. The decor was minimal, the tables were cramped, and the food was incredible. Ethan arrived 10 minutes after she did, still in his work clothes but with his tie loosened and his jacket over his arm. He looked out of place among the families and students and service workers who made up the usual crowd, but he didn't seem to notice or care. "This is great," he said, settling into the plastic chair across from her. "I've lived in New York for 8 years and never been to this neighborhood." "You're missing out. Best Thai food in the borough." They ordered too much food, pad thai and green curry and papaya salad and spring rolls, and ate until they were uncomfortably full. Somewhere between the curry and the third spring roll, Claire felt the tension from the day finally start to unwind. "Thank you," she said, "for earlier, for not letting me quit." "You weren't going to quit. You were going to regroup, which is different." "Felt like quitting." "But you didn't. You fixed it." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "That's the difference between people who succeed and people who don't. Not that they never fail. Everyone fails. It's whether they get back up." "That's very motivational poster of you." "I contain multitudes." Claire laughed, and it felt good. Natural. She'd been so focused on not messing up at work that she'd forgotten she was allowed to enjoy being around him. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said after a while. "Depends what it is." "Why did Marcus leave?" "You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but you've mentioned him a few times and I'm trying to understand what happened." Claire pushed rice around her plate. She'd known this question would come eventually, had been half expecting it for weeks. Still wasn't sure she wanted to answer it. "He got promoted," she said finally. "Big job at a financial firm. Started making real money for the first time in our lives. And I guess once he could afford to upgrade, he did. Found a younger model with no stretch marks and no kid." "That's not your fault." "I know that, logically. But it's hard not to internalize it, you know? Like maybe if I'd been different, better, more exciting, less tired all the time." "Claire, I'm not looking for reassurance. I've done the therapy. I know it wasn't about me. But knowing something intellectually and believing it emotionally are two different things." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Amanda left me for similar reasons. Not for someone else, at least not right away. But she left because I was never there. Because I chose work over her and over Jake, consistently, for years. And she was right to leave. I was a terrible husband. You're being too hard on yourself. Am I? I missed Jake's third birthday because I was closing a deal. I missed our fifth anniversary because I had a conference in Tokyo. I missed probably 70% of my marriage because I was too busy building an empire to notice my family was falling apart. But you're different now. Because I lost everything that mattered. That's not growth. That's consequences finally catching up. Claire looked at him across the table. This man who had everything by most measures but seemed determined to believe he deserved nothing. It was familiar. She recognized it because she saw the same thing in her mirror. We're both kind of a mess, aren't we? She said. Little bit, yeah. Think we can be a mess together without making it worse? I hope so. Otherwise, this is going to get really complicated really fast. They split the check despite Ethan's protests and walked out into the March evening. Spring was trying to happen. The air wasn't quite as cold. The dark came a little later. They walked slowly toward Claire's apartment, in no particular hurry. Jake's been asking about you, Ethan said. Yeah, Lily too. She wants to know when we're doing Friday again. About that. I was wondering if maybe we could do something different this week. Not just the kids at your place. Maybe all of us? I could take everyone to that science museum Jake's been talking about. Make a day of it. Claire's instinct was to say no. A full day together felt like crossing a line, moving from casual friendship into something more intentional. But she thought about Lily's face when she talked about Jake, about how excited she got every Friday, about how nice it had been having people in her life who showed up. Okay, she said, but only if we're going Dutch on admission. Claire, I'm serious, Ethan. If we're doing this, really doing this, I can't have you paying for everything all the time. It makes me feel like a charity case. You're not. I know I'm not. But I need you to let me contribute, even if it's not equal, even if my contribution is tiny compared to yours. I need to feel like a partner, not a dependent. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, we'll split it. Thank you. They'd reached her building. Claire turned to say goodbye, but Ethan caught her hand, gentle but deliberate. This is real, he said quietly. In case you were still wondering, this thing between us. I'm not going anywhere. Claire's heart hammered against her ribs. You can't promise that. Watch me. He leaned down and kissed her, soft and careful, like he was asking permission even though the permission had already been given. Claire kissed him back and felt something tight in her chest finally loosen, some knot of fear and protection that had been there so long she'd stopped noticing the weight. When they pulled apart, Ethan was smiling. Was that okay? Yeah, that was okay. Good. Because I've been wanting to do that for about 6 weeks now. Only 6? Maybe 7. I lost count. Claire laughed and kissed him again, quick and impulsive, then stepped back before she could second-guess it. I should go. Early meeting tomorrow. Same. I'll text you about Saturday. She went inside and climbed the 3 flights, her lips still tingling, her mind racing. Ruth was asleep and Lily was sprawled across her mattress with Mr. Buttons clutched to her chest. Claire got ready for bed, moving quietly, trying not to wake anyone, trying not to think too hard about what had just happened. She failed at both. Saturday arrived bright and unseasonably warm. Lily had been awake since dawn, too excited about the museum to sleep. By the time Ethan and Jake showed up at 9, she'd already changed outfits 3 times and asked approximately 40 questions about what they'd see. Dinosaurs? She asked Jake as they headed for the subway. Definitely dinosaurs and space stuff. And they have this thing where you can see your skeleton on a screen. That's creepy. It's cool. Ruth had declined to join them, claiming her hip hurt, but really just wanting to avoid an entire day of watching children run around a museum. Claire suspected she also wanted to give them space to be a family unit, which was terrifying and sweet in equal measure. The Museum of Natural History was packed with spring break crowds. Ethan paid for everyone's admission before Claire could stop him, and they plunged into the chaos of children and parents and school groups. Jake led them straight to the dinosaur halls. Lily was initially intimidated by the massive skeletons, but Jake's enthusiasm was infectious. Within 20 minutes, she was running between displays, pointing out details, asking questions faster than any of them could answer. That's a triceratops, she shouted. It has 3 horns. Actually 4 if you count the nose horn, Jake corrected, because 6-year-olds couldn't help being technical. But 3 big ones. They spent an hour in the dinosaur halls before moving to the space exhibit. The planetarium show made Lily gasp with wonder. The meteorite samples made Jake reverent and careful. Somewhere between Saturn's rings and the Mars rover, Claire looked over at Ethan and found him watching her instead of the display. "What?" she mouthed. He just smiled and shook his head. Lunch was in the museum cafeteria, which was overpriced and mediocre, but the kids didn't care. They were too busy planning which exhibit to see next, negotiating between ocean life and human evolution like diplomats brokering world peace. "We could split up," Jake suggested. "You and Lily do ocean, me and Dad do evolution, then we switch." "Or we all stay together," Ethan said. "That's kind of the point. But we could see more stuff if we split up." "Jake?" Ethan's voice was patient but firm. "We're staying together." Something in his tone made Jake back down. Claire suspected this was a conversation they'd had before, about family time meaning actual togetherness, about not always optimizing for efficiency. They did the ocean exhibit as a group. Lily was entranced by the blue whale model suspended from the ceiling. Jake explained bioluminescence to her using words that were definitely too advanced, but that he'd clearly memorized from documentaries. They watched the fish in the live exhibits, pressed their faces against the glass, made up stories about where the fish were going. Around 3 o'clock, both kids started flagging. Lily's questions came slower, and Jake stopped correcting everyone's dinosaur facts, which was a sure sign of exhaustion. They found a bench near the exit and sat while the kids leaned against their respective parents, sugar-crashed and content. "This was good," Claire said quietly. "Yeah? Yeah, thank you for suggesting it. Thank you for saying yes. I know it's not easy for you." "What's not easy?" "Letting me in, trusting this." Claire looked at Lily dozing against her shoulder, at Jake fighting to keep his eyes open against Ethan's side. "It's getting easier." "Good." They took the subway back to Queens, the kids completely asleep now, dead weight against them. Other passengers smiled at them, 2 parents with their tired kids coming home from a day out, looking like a normal family. Claire wondered if anyone could tell they were anything but normal, that this was borrowed and fragile and so new it still felt unreal. Back at the apartment, they carried the kids upstairs. Lily barely stirred when Claire laid her on her mattress. Jake woke up enough to say bye, and then passed out again on Claire's couch, leaving Ethan with the dilemma of whether to wake him or let him sleep. "Let him rest," Ruth said from her recliner. "Boy's exhausted. You can wake him in an hour." So Ethan stayed. He and Claire sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee while Ruth pretended to watch TV but actually monitored their every move. They talked about nothing important, work gossip, weekend plans, whether the building's heat would finally get fixed. Normal conversation, domestic. It scared Claire how much she liked it. Around 5, Jake woke up disoriented and cranky. Ethan got him bundled into his coat and shoes, apologizing to Claire about overstaying.
"You didn't overstay? You're welcome any time. Careful. I might take you up on that." "I hope you do." At the door, Ethan kissed her goodbye, brief but meaningful. Jake made a face but didn't comment. They left and Claire closed the door and leaned against it, smiling like an idiot. "You're falling for him," Ruth observed from the couch. "Maybe." "No, maybe about it. I can see it from here." Claire came and sat on the arm of Ruth's recliner. "Is that bad?" "Depends. You think he's falling too?" "I think so. I hope so." "Then no, it's not bad. It's just scary. Love's always scary when it's real." "Who said anything about love?" Ruth gave her a look that said she wasn't fooled for a second. "You did. Just now." Without saying the word. The weeks blurred together in the best way. Work settled into a rhythm. Claire learned the job, made contacts at schools, figured out which administrators were allies and which were obstacles. The coding initiative launched successfully on its second attempt, and the kids' enthusiasm made every frustration worth it. She sat in on their first class and watched 12-year-olds write their first lines of code with the kind of focused intensity usually reserved for video games. One of the kids, a girl named Destiny from PS 114, came up to her after class. "Is it true you used to be a waitress?" "Yeah, for 3 years." "And now you work for a tech company?" "I do." "That's cool. My mom says people like us don't get those jobs." Claire crouched down to Destiny's level. "People like us get whatever jobs we work for.
Don't let anyone tell you different. Destiny nodded seriously, then ran off to join her friends. Claire watched her go and felt something shift. This job wasn't just a paycheck. It was a chance to actually matter. Ethan noticed the change. "You're good at this," he said one evening when they'd both worked late and ended up in his office going over program metrics. "I'm figuring it out." "You're more than figuring it out. The schools love you, the kids love you, even the skeptical board members are coming around."
That's because you made those calls.
"I made introductions. You did the convincing." Claire studied the spreadsheet in front of her, tracking participation rates and equipment usage and volunteer hours. The numbers were good, better than projected. She'd done that. Her work, her effort, her ability to connect with people who lived the life she'd lived. "Thank you," she said, "for giving me this chance. I know you took a risk hiring someone with no experience." "Best risk I ever took." Ethan closed his laptop. "You hungry? There's a late-night ramen place 2 blocks from here." "Is this you asking me on a date?" "This is me acknowledging we've been dating for 6 weeks, and I'd like to make it official by actually calling it a date." 6 weeks? "I'm counting from the kiss." "You can count from somewhere else if you want," Claire considered. "The museum." "I'm counting from the museum." "That's 4 weeks." "I know, I'm being conservative." They went to the ramen place and sat at the bar because all the tables were full. It was loud and cramped, and the ramen was so hot it burned Claire's tongue, and she didn't care. Ethan told her about a disastrous board meeting. She told him about Destiny and the coding class. They talked until the restaurant started closing and the staff began giving them pointed looks. Outside, it had started raining. Not heavy, just a light spring drizzle that made the streetlights blur. "I should get home," Claire said. "Lily's with my mom, but I don't like being out too late." "I'll get you a car." "Ethan, the subway is fine." "It's almost 11 and it's raining. Let me get you a car." She wanted to argue on principle, but she was tired and the idea of a dry ride home was appealing. "Okay, but I'm paying you back." "We can fight about that later." The car arrived and Ethan held the door for her. Before she got in, she pulled him down for a kiss that was probably too public for a professional relationship, but they were past pretending this was just professional. "Text me when you get home safe," he said. "I will." She did, and he responded immediately, even though it was almost midnight. "Sleep well. See you tomorrow." Tomorrow. There was always a tomorrow now. The future had shifted from something to survive into something to anticipate. April brought Jake's 7th birthday and the question of what to do about it. Amanda was throwing a party at their Connecticut house. Expensive entertainment, catered food, 50 of Jake's classmates. Jake didn't want to go. "It's always the same people," he complained to Ethan one Friday at Claire's apartment. "And Mom makes me wear a tie and everyone gives me presents I don't even want." "It's your birthday party, buddy. She's trying to make it special." "Can I have 2 parties? One with Mom's friends and one with my friends?" "Your friends will be at the Connecticut party. Not my real friends." Jake looked at Lily, who was drawing him a birthday card with her fancy pencils. "I want a party with Lily, and Claire, and Miss Ruth." Ethan glanced at Claire with an expression that said, "Help me." Claire had been carefully avoiding the Amanda situation, knowing that every step closer to Ethan meant eventually dealing with his ex-wife's concerns. Apparently that eventually was now. "You should talk to your mom," Claire said to Jake. "Tell her what you want." "She won't listen. She says I'm too young to know what I want." "You're 7. That's old enough to have an opinion." "You think so? I know so." Jake seemed to consider this. Then he turned to his father. "Can we do 2 parties, please?" Ethan sighed. "I'll talk to your mom." That conversation apparently didn't go well because Ethan showed up to work Monday, looking like he'd slept badly, and immediately disappeared into back-to-back meetings. Claire saw him in passing around noon, and he gave her a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. She texted him, "You okay?" "Amanda's being difficult about the birthday thing. I'll handle it. Let me know if I can help." "Just you existing is help. I'll explain later." Later turned out to be 7 o'clock when Ethan knocked on her office door looking exhausted. "Want to get dinner?" he asked. "Sure. Everything okay?" Define okay. They went back to the Thai place because it was becoming their spot. Ethan ordered curry and barely touched it, pushing rice around his plate while not quite meeting Claire's eyes. "Amanda thinks I'm having a midlife crisis," he said finally. Are you?
Maybe? I don't know.
She thinks this thing with you is some kind of quarter-life crisis response to the divorce. That I'm playing poor people pretend to make myself feel better about failing as a husband. Claire felt ice settle in her stomach. Is that what you think? No. But she made some points I can't completely dismiss, about how different our worlds are, about what happens when the novelty wears off, about whether I'm thinking about Jake and how confusing this must be for him. What did you tell her? That she doesn't get a say in my personal life anymore, that Jake is happy, that you're not a phase or a crisis or whatever she wants to believe. Ethan finally looked at her. But I'd be lying if I said her concerns didn't get in my head. Do you think this is real? Claire asked quietly. Or do you think she might be right? I think it's the most real thing in my life right now. But I also think she's right that we're from different worlds, and eventually that might matter. It matters now, Ethan. It's always mattered. I just chose to ignore it because I liked you too much to care. Past tense? No, present tense. I still like you too much to care. But maybe we should care. Maybe we should think about what this looks like long-term and whether it's sustainable. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you. Then don't let her get in your head. Don't let the money and the class difference and all the external stuff matter more than what's actually happening between us. What if it's not enough? What if 6 months from now or a year from now, all those differences do matter and we've just been fooling ourselves? Claire wanted to say that wouldn't happen, wanted to promise that love, because that's what this was becoming, whether she'd admitted it or not, was enough to bridge any gap. But she'd been through this before with Marcus. She knew how money changed things, how class difference created rifts you couldn't see until you were already standing on opposite sides. I can't promise it'll work, she said, but I can promise I'm willing to try. The question is whether you are. I am. I'm just scared. Me too. But I'm more scared of not trying and spending the rest of my life wondering what if. They sat there holding hands across the table while their food went cold. Finally, Ethan said, Jake wants 2 parties, one with Amanda's crowd and one small one with you and Lily and Ruth. I'm going to make that happen. Amanda can be unhappy about it, but that's what Jake wants, and I'm done pretending her approval matters more than my son's happiness. You sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Jake's second birthday party happened the Saturday after the Connecticut event. It was just 6 people crammed into Claire's apartment. Jake and Lily and Ruth and Claire and Ethan and one of Jake's classmates from school, a quiet kid named Marcus who loved dinosaurs almost as much as Jake did. They made cake from a box mix. The kids decorated it with too much frosting and sprinkles that got everywhere. Ruth supervised from her recliner, offering commentary on proper frosting technique that nobody followed. The apartment smelled like sugar and vanilla and sounded like children's laughter. Claire watched Ethan help Jake cut the cake, watched him ruffle his son's hair, watched the easy affection between them that hadn't existed back in December when this all started. She thought about Amanda's accusations, about crisis and novelty and different worlds. And she thought none of it mattered because this was real. Messy and imperfect and real. After cake, after presents, modest things that Jake loved more than the expensive gifts from the Connecticut party. After the kids had played until they crashed, after Jake's classmate had been picked up by his mother, Ethan helped Claire clean up while the kids dozed on the couch. Thank you, he said quietly, for this, for giving Jake the kind of birthday he actually wanted. He's a good kid. He deserves to be happy. So do you. Claire looked at him. This man who'd somehow become essential to her daily routine, to her happiness, to her vision of the future. I'm happy. Scared and uncertain about a lot of things, but happy. Same. He kissed her there in the kitchen with her mother pretending not to watch from the next room and their kids sleeping on the couch and the remains of homemade cake on the counter. It felt like a promise neither of them was quite ready to speak out loud yet, but it was there between them anyway. Growing stronger every day, they chose to show up for each other despite the fear. Summer arrived with the kind of heat that turned the city into an oven. Claire's apartment didn't have air conditioning, just a single window unit in the living room that wheezed and dripped and barely cooled anything. By July, spending evenings there meant sweating through clothes and trying to convince Lily that popsicles counted as dinner. Ethan's solution was predictable and completely inappropriate. Move in with me,
he said one Tuesday when they were both too exhausted from work to pretend they had energy for anything else. They were sitting on Claire's couch, with the pathetic air conditioner rattling behind them, both of them sticky with heat. "Ethan, I'm serious. I have a 3-bedroom penthouse that's sitting mostly empty, central air, a real bedroom for Lily instead of a corner behind a curtain, space for Ruth. You could—" "No." "Just think about it." I said no. He looked hurt but backed off. "Can I ask why?" "Because moving into your penthouse after 6 months makes me look like exactly what Amanda thinks I am. Some gold digger who saw an opportunity and took it." "Amanda doesn't get a vote."
"She's Jake's mother. She absolutely gets a vote." Claire stood up and went to the kitchen for water even though she wasn't thirsty, just needed distance. "And more importantly, I have to be able to look at myself in the mirror. If I move in with you now, into your place, living off your money, how am I any different from Marcus's girlfriend? The one who left me for someone who could provide better." "That's completely different, is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I'd be doing exactly what she did, upgrading, trading up, choosing the easier life." Ethan followed her into the kitchen. "You wouldn't be upgrading. You'd be accepting help from someone who cares about you." "Help I don't need. We're managing fine." "Claire, it's 95 degrees in here. Lily's mattress is on the floor. Your mother can barely navigate this apartment with her walker. You're not managing fine. You're surviving, and there's a difference." The words stung because they were true. Claire had been telling herself they were fine for so long she'd almost believed it. But Ruth's hip was getting worse navigating the cramped space. Lily was outgrowing her corner. The building's landlord had stopped responding to maintenance requests entirely. "I can't," Claire said quietly. "I'm sorry, but I can't." Ethan looked like he wanted to argue more, but something in her expression stopped him. "Okay, I won't push, but the offer stands if you change your mind." He left not long after, and Claire stood in her sweltering kitchen feeling like she'd made the right choice and the wrong choice simultaneously. Ruth appeared from her room, leaning heavily on her walker. "You're an idiot," Ruth said without preamble. "Thanks, Mom. Very helpful." "I'm serious. That man just offered you a way out of this dump, and you said no because of pride." "It's not pride. It's absolutely pride. You're so terrified of being dependent on anyone that you'd rather suffer in this heat than accept help." "I'm not suffering. We're fine." Ruth laughed, sharp and bitter. "Fine. You keep telling yourself that while my hip screams every time I try to shower and Lily wakes up every night because it's too hot to sleep. But sure, we're fine." She shuffled back to her room and closed the door. Claire stood alone in the kitchen and felt the weight of every choice she'd made pressing down on her shoulders. The heat wave broke 3 days later, but the conversation didn't. It sat between Claire and Ethan like a third presence, unresolved and uncomfortable. They kept seeing each other, Friday nights with the kids, occasional dinners, stolen lunch breaks, but something had shifted. Ethan was careful now, watching what he offered, clearly afraid of overstepping again. Claire hated it. Hated that her boundaries had created this distance. Hated that she couldn't seem to accept help without feeling like she was losing herself. Work became her refuge. The coding initiative expanded to 3 more schools. Destiny and her classmates were building their first apps. The success metrics were beyond projections. Claire threw herself into it, staying late, taking on extra responsibilities, anything to avoid going home to the apartment that felt smaller and more suffocating every day. Jennifer noticed. She cornered Claire in the break room one afternoon in late July. "You okay?" Jennifer asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. "I'm fine." "You're here until 8 every night and you look exhausted. That's not fine." Claire poured coffee she didn't want just to have something to do with her hands. "Just busy with the program expansion." "The program expansion is going great. This is about something else." "It's nothing. Is it, Ethan? Did something happen?" Claire looked at Jennifer, this woman who'd been nothing but kind to her, who'd helped her navigate the company, who'd become something like a friend. "He asked me to move in with him. And you said no. How did you—" "Because you're still here looking miserable instead of happy. What's the problem? You two are clearly crazy about each other. The problem is I can't afford to be dependent on him. I can't afford to build my life around someone who might disappear." Jennifer leaned against the counter. "Can I tell you something? Ethan's been different since he met you, more present, more human. Before, he was all business all the time. Now he leaves at 5 to have dinner with his kid. He takes weekends off. He actually laughs at jokes. She paused. I've worked for him for 3 years. I've never seen him happy until you. That's a lot of pressure. I'm not saying it to pressure you. I'm saying it because I think you're both scared of the same thing. You're scared he'll leave. He's scared you don't trust him enough to stay. The words hit harder than Claire expected. Was that what this was about? Not just independence, but trust? The fundamental question of whether she believed Ethan when he said he wasn't going anywhere. She thought about Marcus, about how he'd promised forever and delivered 3 years, about how she'd built a life with him and lost it all when he decided she wasn't worth keeping, about how she'd sworn never to be that vulnerable again. But Ethan wasn't Marcus. He'd proven that over and over, showing up every Friday, supporting her career, loving Lily without expectation, being present for Jake in ways he'd never managed before. Maybe Jennifer was right. Maybe this wasn't about independence at all. Maybe it was about being too scared to believe good things could last. Claire went home that night and found Ruth and Lily watching TV in front of the struggling air conditioner. Lily's hair was plastered to her forehead with sweat. Ruth looked pale and tired. The apartment smelled like heat, an old building, and the general mustiness of a place that never quite dried out. "Mom," Claire said, "can we talk?" Ruth muted the TV. "If this is about me calling you an idiot, I stand by it." "It's not. I mean, it is, but not the way you think." Claire sat on the floor in front of Ruth's recliner because there wasn't anywhere else to sit. "What if I'm wrong? What if I say yes to Ethan and move in and 6 months from now it all falls apart? Then where are we?" "Same place we are now, except you'll have spent 6 months comfortable instead of suffering." "But Lily, Lily deserves a room with a door. She deserves to not wake up sweating, and she deserves a mother who's brave enough to accept love when it's offered." "You think I'm not brave?" "I think you're terrified." "Which I understand. Marcus did a number on you, but at some point you have to decide whether you're going to let fear run your life or whether you're going to take a chance on something good." Lily had been listening quietly. Now she spoke up. "I like Ethan's place. It has big windows, and Jake's room is there. We could have sleepovers every night." Claire looked at her daughter. "Would you want to live there?" "Only if you want to, but yeah, it would be nice to have space." Ruth added, "My hip would appreciate not having to navigate 3 flights of stairs every time I need to see a doctor." Claire sat there on the floor of her cramped, hot apartment and felt something crack open inside her. All this time, she'd been protecting her independence, protecting her pride, protecting herself from potential hurt. But in doing so, she'd been making everyone else's life harder. That wasn't strength. That was just stubbornness. She pulled out her phone and texted Ethan. "Can we talk? Tomorrow? It's important." His response came immediately. "Anytime. My office or yours?" "Yours, noon." She barely slept that night, running through what she'd say, how to explain that she'd been wrong without making it sound like she was giving up on herself. By morning, she still hadn't figured it out. Ethan's office was on the 45th floor with windows overlooking half of Manhattan. Claire had been there before, but never alone, never for a conversation that felt this important. Jennifer waved her through with an encouraging smile. Ethan was on the phone when Claire arrived, but he wrapped up quickly, gesturing for her to sit. He looked nervous, which made her feel slightly better about her own anxiety. "Hey," he said. "What's up?" Claire sat in one of the expensive chairs across from his desk and tried to find the right words. "I've been thinking about what you said, about moving in. Claire, if this is you feeling pressured, it's not. Just let me talk, okay?" She took a breath. "I said no because I was scared. Scared of losing my independence, scared of what it would look like. Scared that you'd change your mind and I'd be left with nothing again. But I realized something. By saying no, I wasn't protecting myself. I was just punishing everyone because I'm too afraid to believe good things can last." Ethan started to respond, but she held up a hand. "I'm not done. If we do this, I need things to be clear. I'm not a guest. I'm not someone you're taking care of. I pay rent. Not equal to what you pay because I can't afford that, but something. Enough that I feel like a partner, not a dependent. And Lily and I keep our independence. We're not moving in to be rescued. We're moving in because we choose to, because we want to be with you and Jake, not because we need your money." "Okay," Ethan said carefully. What amount feels right to you? I don't know. What's fair market value for a bedroom in a 3-bedroom Manhattan penthouse? Probably around $4,000 a month. Claire's stomach dropped. That's more than I make. Which is why I'm not asking you to pay that. What can you afford? 800, maybe 1,000 if I'm careful. Then pay 1,000. We'll call it rent for 1 bedroom plus shared living space. That's not fair to you. Claire. Ethan leaned forward. I don't care about the money. I care that you feel like an equal partner. If paying rent does that, fine. Pay rent. But please stop thinking of this as charity. I want you there. I want to fall asleep next to you and wake up with you. I want Jake to have a full house instead of an empty penthouse. I want family dinners and movie nights and all the normal stuff I've been missing my entire adult life. Claire felt tears prick her eyes. What if it doesn't work? Then we figure it out, together. But I'm tired of living like failure is inevitable. At some point, we have to believe we're worth the risk. She thought about Christmas Eve, about a lonely man sitting outside a cafe, and a little girl who'd decided he needed help, about how far they'd come from that night, about how many times they'd both been scared and shown up anyway. Okay, she said, we'll try it, but slowly. Give us a month to adjust, and if at any point it's not working, for any of us, we revisit the arrangement. Ethan's smile was bright enough to light the entire office. Deal. When can you move in? I have to give my landlord 30 days' notice. I'll cover the rent for your apartment for the next 3 months so you don't lose it. If things don't work out, you have somewhere to go back to. Ethan. Safety net, for both of us. Knowing you have options makes this less scary, right? It did. Claire nodded, feeling some of the anxiety ease. Okay, then I guess we're doing this. We're doing this. He came around the desk and pulled her into a hug that felt like coming home. Claire let herself relax into it, let herself believe that maybe this could work, that maybe she didn't have to protect herself from everything all the time. Thank you, Ethan murmured into her hair, for taking a chance on me. Thank you for being patient while I figured it out. They stood there in his office, holding each other, while Manhattan sprawled below them and the future stretched ahead full of possibility and fear and hope in equal measure. Moving took 2 weeks of packing and planning and several arguments about what to bring. Claire wanted to take everything. Ethan gently suggested maybe they didn't need her broken coffee maker when his penthouse had a fancy espresso machine. Ruth declared that all her furniture was coming or she wasn't moving at all. Lily changed her mind 40 times about which stuffed animals made the cut. The penthouse absorbed them like it had been waiting. Lily got the smaller guest room, which was still twice the size of her corner behind the curtain. Ruth got the master guest room with an attached bathroom and enough space to actually maneuver her walker. Claire's things merged with Ethan's in the master bedroom, her second-hand dresser looking out of place next to his expensive furniture until Ethan moved some of his stuff out to balance it. See? He said. It's already looking like home. Your definition of home is weird. Our definition. It's our home now. The first week was awkward. Everyone was too polite, too careful about space and boundaries. Lily asked permission before getting snacks. Ruth kept thanking Ethan for things. Claire felt like a guest in a hotel. Beautiful, but not quite real. The second week was better. Jake started staying over more often, his things mixing with Lily's until no one could tell which dinosaur belonged to whom. Ruth claimed the living room recliner as her territory and started rearranging furniture without asking. Claire stopped asking permission to use the kitchen. By the third week, it actually felt like home. They developed routines. Ethan made coffee in the mornings. Claire packed lunches. Ruth supervised homework. The kids created elaborate games that took over the entire living room. Dinner happened around the table, all 6 of them crowded together, talking over each other, arguing about nothing important. It was chaotic and imperfect, and nothing like the careful life Claire had been protecting for so long. It was also the happiest she'd ever been. August brought another complication. Amanda wanted to revise the custody arrangement. She showed up at the penthouse on a Saturday morning unannounced, while Ethan was out getting bagels with both kids. Claire was cleaning up breakfast when the doorbell rang. Ruth was still asleep. Claire opened the door to find a woman in expensive athleisure wear and perfect highlights staring at her with barely concealed hostility. You must be Claire, Amanda said. And you must be Amanda. Ethan's not here. I know. I saw him leave with the kids. I wanted to talk to you. This was exactly the confrontation Claire had been dreading. She considered closing the door, but that felt cowardly. Instead, she stepped back. Come in. Amanda walked through the penthouse like she was cataloging evidence. Her eyes tracked over the kids' drawings on the fridge, the mismatched furniture, Ruth's medications lined up on the counter. When she turned back to Claire, her expression was cold. I want you to understand something, Amanda said. Jake is my son. I will do whatever it takes to protect him. I'm not trying to hurt him. Maybe not intentionally, but you're changing his life. Moving in here, playing house with his father, becoming some kind of mother figure. What happens when this ends? When Ethan gets tired of slumming it and goes back to his real life? Claire felt her temper rising, but kept her voice level. This is his real life. This is our real life. I'm sorry if that bothers you, but we're not playing anything. You've been together, 7 months? And you've already moved in, integrated your families, convinced him to reduce his work hours. That's not love. That's manipulation. You think I want his money? I'm paying rent. I have my own job. I don't need him to support me. Everyone needs something. Maybe you need security. Maybe you need someone to save you. Either way, you're using him. No. Claire stepped closer, done with being careful. You're projecting. You left him because he chose work over family. He changed. He figured out what actually matters. And you can't stand that he didn't figure it out for you. Amanda's face flushed. You don't know anything about our marriage. I know enough. I know he was miserable. I know he'd lost himself trying to be what everyone expected. And I know he's happy now. Actually happy. If you loved him, even just as the father of your child, you'd be glad about that. Don't you dare tell me what I should feel. Then don't come into my home and accuse me of manipulating the man I love. The words hung in the air. Claire hadn't meant to say it like that, hadn't meant to admit it out loud to Ethan's ex-wife before she'd even said it to Ethan himself. But it was out now, and it was true. Amanda's expression shifted into something complicated, hurt and anger, and maybe a trace of understanding. You love him. Yeah, I do. And Jake? You love him too? He's a good kid, smart, funny, kind. Yeah, I love him. Not trying to replace you, just trying to be someone else in his corner. Amanda was quiet for a long moment. He talks about you constantly. About Lily and the dinosaurs and the apartment. She stopped. The old apartment, before you moved here. He said it was small but happy, that everyone smiled a lot. We do smile a lot. Ethan never smiled. The whole time we were married, he barely smiled. He was intense and focused and exhausted. Never happy. Amanda's voice cracked slightly. I tried everything to make him happy. And then you show up and suddenly he's a different person. Claire felt unexpected sympathy for this woman she'd been prepared to hate. It's not about me. It's about him deciding what kind of life he wants. I just happened to be there when he figured it out. Maybe. Amanda moved toward the door. I'm still modifying the custody arrangement, not to reduce his time, to increase it. Jake wants more time with his father, and I'm done fighting it, but I need you to promise me something. What? If this ends, you let Jake keep his relationship with his father. You don't make Ethan choose. You don't turn this into a situation where he has to pick between you and his son. I would never. Promise me anyway. Claire met her eyes. I promise. Jake comes first, always. Amanda nodded and left. Claire closed the door and leaned against it, shaking slightly. Ruth's voice came from the hallway. That woman's got ice in her veins. You were listening? Of course I was listening. Wanted to make sure she wasn't going to attack you. Ruth shuffled closer with her walker. You handled it well, though. Better than I would have. I thought she'd be worse. She's scared. People say cruel things when they're scared. Ruth settled onto the couch. You really love him, Ethan? Yeah, I really do. Good. He loves you too. Anyone with eyes can see it. Ethan came home with the kids 20 minutes later, carrying bags of bagels and already laughing at something Jake had said. He took one look at Claire's face and knew something had happened. What's wrong? Amanda was here. His expression darkened. What did she say? Nothing terrible. We talked, cleared some air. She's increasing your custody time. She's what? Jake wants more time with you. She's not going to fight it anymore. Ethan looked stunned. Did you do something? I just told her the truth, that we're real, that I love you, that Jake comes first. She said it casually, like it wasn't the first time, like those words weren't carrying the weight of everything they'd been building. Ethan set down the bagels slowly. You love me? Yeah, is that okay? He crossed the room and kissed her in front of both kids and Ruth and anyone else who might be watching. When he pulled back, he was smiling. Yeah, that's okay. Because I love you too. Gross, Jake announced. Can we eat now? So gross, Lily agreed, but she was grinning. They ate bagels and didn't talk about Amanda or custody or any of the complicated stuff. They just existed together as a family, imperfect and blended and real. Fall arrived, and with it, a year since that Christmas Eve when everything changed. Claire suggested they go back to the cafe where it all started, maybe find someone else spending the holiday alone. Ethan thought it was perfect. Ruth complained it was too cold, but came anyway. The kids made cards to give to whoever they found. The cafe was warm and crowded, just like before. But this time, Claire wasn't alone. This time, she had Ethan beside her and Lily on her lap, and Jake explaining dinosaur facts to anyone who'd listen. They stayed for 2 hours, bought coffee for strangers, left generous tips for the exhausted staff. On their way out, Claire saw a woman sitting alone at the window table where Ethan had been a year ago. She looked tired and lonely, and like she was holding herself together by force of will. Claire recognized that look. She'd worn it herself. Excuse me, Claire said, approaching the woman. This is going to sound strange, but are you alone tonight? The woman looked wary. Why? Because last year, my daughter invited a stranger to spend Christmas with us, and it changed our lives, so we're paying it forward. Lily held up her handmade card. You can come to our house. We're having turkey and games, and it's warm, and we have a really big TV. The woman's eyes filled with tears. I couldn't impose. You're not imposing, Ethan said gently. We're inviting, no pressure, but if you'd like company tonight, you're welcome. Her name was Sarah. She'd moved to New York 6 months ago for a job that fell through. She was broke and alone and spending Christmas in a cafe because her studio apartment was too depressing to bear. She came back to the penthouse and sat quiet and overwhelmed while Ruth fed her, and Lily showed her every drawing she'd ever made, and Jake explained the complete history of the Mesozoic era. Somewhere around 10 o'clock, after dinner and games and too much pie, Sarah said quietly to Claire, Thank you. I didn't think anyone noticed people like me. I was you, Claire said. A year ago. Different circumstances, but same loneliness. Someone noticed me. Now I notice other people. Does it get better? Claire looked around the living room, at Ethan helping Jake build something with Legos, at Lily teaching Ruth a clapping game, at this space that had become home not because it was expensive or beautiful, but because it was filled with people who chose to show up for each other. Yeah, she said, it gets better. Sarah left around midnight with their phone numbers and promises to meet for coffee. After everyone else had gone to bed, Claire and Ethan stood at the windows looking out at the city sparkling below them. 1 year, Ethan said. Feels like longer. Feels like no time at all. I was so lost back then. I didn't even know how lost until Lily asked why I looked sad. Claire leaned against him. You weren't the only one lost. I was just better at hiding it. We found each other, though. We did. Ethan turned to face her, his expression serious. I want to do this forever. Wake up next to you, raise these kids together, find lonely people in cafes on Christmas Eve. All of it. Is this a proposal? Not yet. I'm traditional enough to want to ask properly, with a ring and a plan and probably a lot of nervousness. But I'm telling you now so you know it's coming, so you have time to prepare your answer. Claire's heart was racing. I don't need time. I already know what I'd say. Yeah? Yeah. They stood there at the window while the city celebrated below, and their kids slept safely in their rooms, and the future stretched ahead full of all the complications and joys and everyday moments that made up an actual life. 6 months later, Ethan proposed in that same cafe, at that same table, with Lily and Jake and Ruth all there to witness it. The owner gave them free coffee. The other customers applauded. Claire said yes through tears and laughter and the overwhelming certainty that this was exactly where she was supposed to be. They got married in October, a small ceremony in their apartment. No longer his penthouse, but theirs, full of mismatched furniture and kids' drawings and the gentle chaos of a blended family. Ruth walked Claire down the short hallway to where Ethan waited. Lily and Jake stood beside them as official witnesses. Amanda came and was gracious about it, her new boyfriend beside her, all of them figuring out how to make this complicated family structure work. During the vows, Ethan said, "You saved my life, you and Lily. You saw someone drowning and you decided to help, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life being grateful for that kindness." Claire said, "You taught me it's okay to need people, that accepting help isn't weakness, that love isn't something to fear, but something to run toward, even when you're scared." Jake and Lily exchanged looks that said adults were embarrassing, but they'd tolerate it because it was important. Ruth cried, which she later denied despite photographic evidence. Years passed. The coding initiative expanded to 30 schools. Destiny graduated high school with a full scholarship to MIT. Jake and Lily remained best friends even as they grew older and their interests diverged. Ruth's hip got replaced and she became more mobile, spending her time volunteering at a senior center and terrorizing the other residents with her sharp commentary. Claire and Ethan had another child, a daughter they named Hope, because that's what their whole relationship had been built on. The hope that good things could last if you chose to believe in them. Every Christmas Eve, they returned to that cafe. Sometimes they found people to invite home. Sometimes they just had coffee and remembered. The tradition became important not because of any single moment, but because of what it represented. The night everything changed because a little girl decided loneliness was something you fought against, not something you accepted. People ask Claire sometimes how she'd done it, how she'd gone from 3 jobs and a studio apartment to this life. She'd tried explaining it once, about taking chances and accepting help and learning to trust, but it came out sounding like a fairy tale, like something that happened to other people, not regular people like her. The truth was messier. The truth was years of therapy and arguments and moments of doubt. The truth was Ruth's hip replacement and Amanda's wedding and Jake struggling in school and Lily's anxiety and all the normal problems that didn't disappear just because you fell in love. But the truth was also this. Happiness wasn't something you achieved once and kept forever. It was something you chose every day. Every morning when you woke up next to someone and decided to stay. Every evening when you came home exhausted and still found energy to ask about everyone's day. Every Friday when you showed up even though it would be easier not to. Ethan had been a billionaire who'd lost track of what mattered. Claire had been someone so scared of being hurt that she'd stopped letting people close. They'd both been drowning in their own ways. And then a 4-year-old girl named Lily had looked at a stranger and decided he needed saving. And that decision had saved all of them. That was the story they told their kids when they were old enough to understand. Not a story about money or class or overcoming odds. A story about noticing when someone was hurting and deciding to help. About small acts of kindness creating ripples that changed everything. Because in the end, that was all any of them could do. Notice each other's pain. Offer comfort, show up, keep showing up even when it was hard. And maybe, if they were lucky, that would be enough. For Claire and Ethan, standing in their apartment on Christmas Eve years after that first meeting, watching their children play and their family laugh, and their imperfect life unfold in all its messy glory, it was more than enough. It was everything.